G'day, folks. Welcome to the AOS Coach preview into part of the new Dawnbringers book, which is Shadow of the Crone. There is a part of this going to be talking about Cities of Sigmar. Yes, the Crone is a Daughters of Cain unit, but Cities of Sigmar is getting touched. And Kyle and I have been kind of in the works now, going to talk about Cities of Sigmar. And with the new units or whatever's coming, we won't ruin it just yet. We thought it was a great opportunity to kind of wait till the new war scrolls are available and we can revisit Cities of Sigmar, given there has been so much that has happened between the battle scroll impacting both rule changes and points adjustments, this new unit as we're about to talk about, and maybe some new rules. We'll see what happens. And overall, just seeing factions like the LVO and many other tournaments where Cities of Sigmar has really done well, and not necessarily with one particular build. Yes, Gavin did well with steam tanks. Jeremy did well with, a bit of a mixture of the Pontifex and things like that. But it hasn't really felt like there's this one list that kind of rules them all, unlike, the Squigs and some of the other particular builds. But Kyle Calip is one of, SoCal's finest. I'm going to call him the list whisperer. You may or may not know what we're talking about here, but know that he's a bit of a puppet master behind the scenes when it comes to some of the more popular performances for cities, at least in America. He does incredibly well whispering behind the ears of kind of like the shadow guy in the command corp you are. That's kind of like what you are. Exactly. You are. But Kyle, you've been playing cities for a while now, and do you want to introduce yourself other than being the list whisperer and someone who's well regarded in this space?
I'm as I said, I'm Kyle Calip. I've been playing for about whenever COVID started, a little bit before that. I walked into a store one day and saw a Maw Crusher and said, I really, really want to get one of these. I ended up never buying one because my roommate ended up getting one. But I originally kind of started playing right when COVID started. And because there was COVID, no one was playing except Team America. So my only people to play against was Team America. So I got my ass beat until I learned how to play the game. So now I'm here and able to talk about an army that is just like so unlike every other army in the game. It's going to be fun.
It's an absolute cracker of an army, and full disclosure here, Kyle and I have been talking behind the scenes. I've got a team tournament coming up in a few weeks' time, and I'm like, I might do cities again. And I swear, just talking to Kyle in the last 2 weeks, I swear my list has changed about 100 times. It's gone from it's gone from I'm going to play Daughters of Cain with the new Crone to this evolution of cities, and now I'm sending in photos like, look at all my steam tanks, and here's my Griffin, and here's my Wild Corp, and like I'm scouring the world for the Wilder Corp hunters. My gosh, please release them early. I'm sick of trying to hunt down people splitting the ogre box.
What they call it, the hunter and the hunted.
I am literally the hunter. I just want to hunt down and get more dogs. I want to who let the dogs out. But Kyle, before we get into the discussion, this was sent to me by Games Workshop. I don't have the physical book in front of me right now, so you either need to trust that I either know the rules or I'm really good at making things up. So I'll leave you to judge if you trust me enough. But if you are thinking about buying the book and or some of the units, feel free to support the channel through either Gap Games in Australia, Element Games in the UK, or Warpfire Minis. The link is down below in the episode description. Your support will go towards the channel, and there's a lot of things that I'm spending a lot of money on right now that may or may not lead into some battle reports in the later half of the year. I may or may not have spent like $3,000 or more on a custom table, and now I need to go buy equipment. But appreciate it if you do help with the hobby or any of your hobby needs through those links. So much appreciated, and thanks Games Workshop for sending me the rules. Before we get into that, Kyle, why cities? Why do you like cities? Give me the flavor, right? Like, let's imagine that I was new to cities, or it's a faction that I've heard about the win percentages, and I like the models, and there's things going on. What drew you to the faction?
Okay, so I'm going to give 3 reasons off the top of my head. The first one is flavor. Like, I love Well, if you love the old world, Warhammer Fantasy, this is all your models in one army, right? If you love the combination of what the three factions of like elves, dwarves, and humans could have been, this is the army, right? But beyond that, it's like in Age of Sigmar and 40k to an extension, there's all these like super powerful beings, and then like, but who's the common guy, right? Well, your little steel helm is like, he doesn't even have an allegiance ability really. He's just a guy who's looking to his leaders and then just hoping that like it's going to be okay, right? And like a lot of the stories are written from the Cities of Sigmar perspective because they have the most relatable kind of like perspective, and they're kind of like the underdogs, and it's like it's fun to want to be them, right? And then beyond that, like the actual rules, it's unlike any other army. As I'll kind of talk about later, you have this order system. It's different from OBR in that, like, I was once told that OBR is like the only real army in regards to like it has lines, it has like the you have an organized command structure, like where every other army is just like dudes like running at something, right? But Cities of Sigmar now exist as like the order version of that, and then they have like a unique mechanic to kind of like make it really feel like that, right? And then the last reason being, besides the models, like the new models are really cool. But beyond that is I really, really like playing in my opponent's turn. And Cities of Sigmar is like the army that plays in your opponent's turn. And actually, like, if you're not playing in your opponent's turn, you're probably doing it wrong. So it's to have a measure of control over, like, if you really, really know the game and your opponent doesn't, maybe, the cities will be like your player skill will kind of like show out there. Hopefully that's the intent, right? Now, maybe pushing 16 tanks around is pretty easy, but but those are the reasons why I really, really love the army. I own a whole bunch of them, right? But I keep going back to cities, like, I know I can get this to work, and when it works, it's going to be beautiful,
It's a list builder's dream because there is so much complexity in this army. Now, if you're a new player thinking, I want to get into cities, I would kind of like warn you that there's probably a steep learning curve, but it's a wonderful army that you could sit here and play it for years and years and years. And I don't think you'd ever get bored because there's so much variety and flexibility and so many parts of the book that you can explore. And we're going to explore that obviously in this particular discussion. It's not just about Dawnbringers 5. We will also revisit Cities of Sigmar as a faction and kind of see what Kyle's thinking for the remainder part of this Generals Handbook. But it is a really interesting faction. I can't wait to start playing with them properly. I'm going to be testing my first games out tomorrow, funnily enough. So it's an army that I can't wait to kind of get under the hood. And yeah, there's a lot of counterplay that I'm really looking forward to. But I know people listening to this are thinking, Coach, shut up and get to the rules. I want to see what the gods have given us because we as Cities of Sigmar, we're struggling. Our win percentage is like in the high 50s. We need a little bit of help, even though, we won the biggest tournament in the world and we're doing incredibly well. Please, Games Workshop, give me some love. And look, yes, Cities is doing very well. And that's partially the context that will apply when we go into the faction overview and maybe some of the Battlescroll changes. So let's actually get into the rules and show the sexy stuff that is coming in the Dawnbringers, the Crone, the Shadows of the Crone. So what we have is there is no army of renown. So just put that into perspective. There is no Broad Stomp. There is no All Dragon army. What we do have is we have a new unit. So Callis, Toll, and Friends. Technically companions, I'm calling them friends. If you are a non-cities player, you can take this unit and there is a regiment of renown where they get even more rules. So we as cities players cannot use those regiments of renown. It's everyone whose order that's not cities. So let's look at the rules first. Let's look at the actual war scrolls and then we'll kind of look at the army of renown. What we've got here is we have a unit of 2 + 3. So you have Callis, you have Toll, and you have Friends. Now, Callis and Toll, this is their war scroll. Move of 5, save of 4+, bravery of 8, 5 wounds each. They have a shooting attack and a melee attack, which is okay. Like, it's pretty standard. Like, nothing crazy, nothing hot garbage. It's a bit of a mixed kind of profile. You have a 5-up ward with the Grim Determination, which is a very lovely ability. The Action Firewood Stakes. So after this unit has fought for the first time in combat, you can say that Mr. Toll, Hanvir Toll, will attempt to plunge his Action Firewood Stake in the heart of a foe. If you do so, pick one enemy model within 1 inch of Toll and roll 2d6. If the roll is greater than the wounds characteristic of that enemy model's unit, it's slain. Okay, not bad. Couple of other rules, and then I'll get Kyle to kind of give me some thoughts so far. Right tools for the job. You might recognize this from our Bring Our Daughter to Work Day, although Darelia is definitely better than Dad, where you double the damage characteristic of attacks made with a unit's weapon profile. Weapons if the target is a wizard or a demon. You also get a rule called Get It Done. If this unit makes a charge move, you can re-roll the charge roll for the friendly Toll's companions if they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit at the end of the phase. Cool. Kyle, they're 350 points for Callis, Toll, and Friends. It's going to take up a leader slot. They are single and they are unique. And the overall combination are called the Saviours of the Cinderfall. Don't get confused about the same name, which is the Regiment of Renown. That creates some confusion. So I'm going to pause here for a second. What do we think so far without seeing the Friends profile?
I think as far as Callis and Toll go, especially comparing them to, say, Duralia and Galen.
Galen?
Is it Galen? I always call him Galen, but the Vendets, right?
Yes.
But anyway, so I immediately, because it's a unit of 2, it becomes so different from any other hero units that kind of exist, in that it's not just I don't think it's just you have 4 attacks, and 3 attacks, there's 2 of them, so it's actually 6 attacks and 8 attacks respectively, right? So especially with the right tools for the job, if you play against an angry Welshman who plays Khorne all the time, the double damage is going to add up. You're like, oh, I'm going to countercharge and I'm just going to, kill your bloodthirster, maybe, right? That's a right tool for the job is really, really strong, I find. It's particularly in cities when you get a countercharge gives you Ren 2 and people don't really expect it. And so you're just like, oh, I'm going to hit you. Oh, you're 2 dudes. What are they going to do? I'm like, okay, well, I got 8 attacks sitting on maybe 2s and 3s, maybe 2s and 2s, Ren 2, damage 4. You're like, oh, I didn't see that one coming, right? I actually do think red tools for the job is actually probably the most important thing here. But the fire stakes is really kind of the difference between killing, winning the game. If you're countercharging into Immortus Guard, right, and you just pick the one in the middle and you kill it, that's a game-winning move right there, So or Margast or any other Varangard, pick the one up in the middle. 2d6 is a massive. There's a lot of variance, right? The average is still 7, but when you think that the biggest models you're usually going to be killing is wound 5, that means you're usually going to kill something pretty important. It might even be a hero, actually, which is kind of you can engage into a unit that's standing next to a hero, not even fight the hero, hit the unit, and then kill the hero, right? You can get a lot of value out of just this unit. And I think the unit itself is really, really good. And then, the last thing here is that the pistols can go up to 15-inch range. So if you're 6 shots at damage 2 into a wizard that was within 15 inches, they're not going to be super happy about that.
I was just while you were talking, I was just quickly looking up the war scroll to see if they both had the pistols and the blades, which I'm sure people are thinking about. I don't have it written, but yes, it says the model in this unit are armed with the each is armed with the flintlock pistols and the Azerite blades. Sorry. So yes, you're right. Both of them will get the 3 attacks. So realistically, the unit of 2 is going to be 6 attacks. They have to act as a unit. It's not like Darelia and Galen. Like they're not individual solo operators. So you're going to get, I guess, essentially 6 attacks from the pistols, 8 attacks from the blades, let alone any extra buffs that kind of come along from your faction. Right tools for the job is a great little rule, but we're talking about the daddy and daughter combination, who also have the same rules, but they're coming in at half the price.
Yeah.
They're coming in at half the price. You know, they are what, 160, 180, 160, right? This is 350, and obviously there's a companion to talk about as well. But if that rule is so good, why don't I just go to those two? And I think this is a legitimate question.
The 2 reasons. First is that this is a rallyable unit. So like if you are in, so it says Hammerhall Aksha is where these guys are kind of like locked into. Not that it matters for anything that's not Lethis. Maybe Misthaven cares, but not really, right? So specifically, if Talia is in the list, one of say Toll dies, or actually you would probably keep Toll for last. Say Callis died, you could 4-up rally and get a whole hero back. You know, we don't know if that's entirely how it works, but if that's how it works, it's kind of gnarly, right? The second thing is that I actually think there's an argument to take both. Like if you're already taking Callis and Toll, Galen and Darelia kind of give you, whereas like 350 is a lot of points for I'm missing a heroes now. Well, Galen and Darelia will give you basically the since they're kind of like really well costed for heroes, they're actually the cheapest heroes you can take in cities. If you think about it, like the cheapest is normally 90. You're saving points by taking them, and then you're really leaning into this. Like you have so much anti-wizard and demon that in those matchups where you are playing against wizards and demons, they're going to be much, much easier because you have these 4 characters that are basically just going to double their damage. So
it's a good point, right? Because I'm looking at, you know, like some of the win percentages. I'm looking on the right hand side of my screen at Wohammer's stats, and like, you know, who is, you know, in the top of the meta. And we know Khorne is doing well. We know Maggotkin of Nurgle is doing well. We know Tzeentch is doing well. Hedonites of Slaanesh, I'm sorry, is not doing as well. But as we also know, we are in the Generals Handbook, all about wizards and Blizzard and, you know, Hoarfrost, and people are doubling down on the primal magic die. So if there's any time to take advantage, whether it is Callis and Toll, whether it is daddy and daughter, or even like, I don't know if Hexbane Hunters have that rule as well.
They do not, but they have a +1 damage. Like they just pick a unit. It's a little more generalized, but it's
a good time. It's a good time to be going hunting wizards and demons, I guess, is my point.
And the models are beautiful. Like if you just want to have your whole army, like you're already taking 66 Wilder Core, you know.
Anything else you talk about so far? I mean, the Axion Firewood Stakes is a really interesting little piece of tech. The ward save, obviously being 5, is really delicious. Get it done is a really impactful rule when we go into the friends. Right now, it's like, so what? But when you start to see some of the things that are coming with the friends, it becomes a bit more valuable.
I would agree. Anytime you have a reroll charge, it's phenomenal, right? Especially on a counter charge. If you can, you know, say that they needed to reroll their charge, and you're like, okay, well, the other guys are also counter charging. But I'm still not sold on the friends is actually my biggest problem. But we can go to it.
Yeah, don't ruin Christmas. I've still got a box to unwrap. We've unwrapped one of the gifts under the tree, and it's like, oh, we have a Callis and Toll. This looks okay. So far, so good, Kyle. Do we like what we see so far?
Yes.
Where are you
really
standing?
Like Callis and Toll. Specifically, this everything that's on the screen here. I really like this unit. The price is a little expensive, though. The price is definitely expensive. For 350, this is more expensive than Black Talon. And if you think about how much like value you get out of Nave, whatever name is, running across the board, killing your opponent's general, then teleporting all the way back, and like you basically have Sylvaneth rules in any order army. So far, Callis and Toll, all they have actually done is maybe kill a wizard in melee. And then also you can sometimes break cohesion, which honestly, breaking cohesion does win games. Like I can't understate that, especially because this is after combat. So after you fight, so your opponent can fight first, and like, okay, now you fought, I'm going to kill you, right? But there are a lot of units in the game that have a similar break cohesion, and while it's really powerful, it's not like, oh, you're seeing this. You don't see a Stormcast Dragon every single time you show up at the table, right? Even though it's an amazing ability.
Yeah.
So
I think we both agree, like talking offline, the question right now is, it's a cool unit. Is it worth 350? Because 350 could be that's another unit of Command Corp. It could be Talia, the new Manticore, general. It could be a steam tank. It could be so many things. Like, considering our points have gone up over the last battle scroll, we don't have 350 to spend, let alone we've got even less now to spend. So that's the big question mark. And if you did, is it Neve? Is it the Hexbane Hunters? Is it like, what is it that goes into this slot? But from what we see so far, we like. The question is it worth it? Which brings us to the friends, Toll's companion. So you're going to see here there is a range of attack profiles. You can see here it comes with 3 models. There are 3 friends. 2 of them have 3 wounds. 1 of them has 5 wounds. So yeah, it's basically, what's that, 3, 6, 11 wounds in the Friends Companion group. Yeah, they can issue their own commands. There is a Griff Hound as well, which is there to bite things. It has the vicious beaks, and you can see that the attack profile is all right. I mean, the decking rope with grapnel is Ren -2 for damage 3, but there's only 1 attack, 4s and 2s. There's the cane gun, 4s, 3s, Ren 1 for 1. A lot of chip damage, nothing crazy, but it's enough to be annoying, like the 6 sword attacks, for example, from the Castellan sword. You have Valis, who has the wounds characteristic of 5, which is where I got the 11 wounds for the unit. While the unit has Valis, or you ignore modifiers to save rolls that for attacks that target this unit. There is the Secret from the Shadows, where while this unit includes the Mistress Vertigris, or called Mistress V. Each time an enemy unit within 12 inches of this unit receives a command, roll the dice. On a 5+, you receive a command point. Finally, and what I was talking about earlier, the reference to the reroll charge thing, is the Silent as Death. Now, during deployment, instead of setting up this unit and a friendly Callis and Toll unit on the battlefield, you can put it to one side and say that they are keeping to the shadows as a reserve unit. At the end of your movement phase, you can set this unit up wholly within 3 inches of any terrain feature or faction terrain features, and more than 9 from all enemy units. Then set up the friendly Callis and Toll within 3 inches of that unit, more than 9 inches from all enemies. Both units can be set up in the same garrison. So, what are we thinking now? Like, let's talk about the companions first, and then maybe reflect back on that 350.
So the first thing, I always can't not compare this to Black Talon, just because it is so similar in points. Knave's companions, one of them includes a wizard, right? And like, you get so much value out of having a wizard, right? And then the thing that the unit does is that it acts as a return point that Cici goes back to. So you actually care about where that unit is. You move it around, and you get 3 separate units basically for the 340. Toll's companions, I love unrendable. Like, it's very good, especially in your aura of +1 to save from the Warforger, but it is still only 11 wounds. Like, thinking more about the broader game, the best version of this kind of like interaction is High King Velmorn and his sons. Like Velmorn makes the sons get back up. The big son, like when he dies, he comes back on a 4-up, and this guy has like 4 wounds or whatever, right? Valis is not getting back up unless you're spending 300 points for Talia, right? And also, like, it doesn't even have a ward unless you're spending 180 points and rolling a 3-up for the Pontifex. And if you're doing that, then you're not taking advantage of Silent as a Death, because now you're in your castle, right? Secrets from the Shadows can be very helpful, especially for the forward deploy. Like, okay, I'm gonna put this unit here. You can, if you ignore it, I'm gonna farm CP off of you moving, doing anything in your turn. If you're playing against OBR often, you can get a lot of CP from this. But you're not denying anything. So, I mean, if you really want to like play in your opponent's turn, you take some Dark Riders, you take a command core, you take this unit, and you just go, okay, you spend a command point. Okay, I'm gonna deny it on a 4-up. Well, first I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna gain 1 on a 5-up. I'll deny it on a 5-up, and then I'll get denied a second time on a 4-up in case I failed every single roll up until this point. Right? It's funny, but it's not really like I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't take this necessarily to a competitive thing just for the companions. You know what I mean? But the let's see. I mean, that's really all there is to it. There's a lot of profiles on this War Scroll. If you're countercharging, this goes to Ren 2, Ren 3. Kind of neat. If you add +1 to attacks, that's a lot of profiles. You get an additional 4 attacks. I've been getting a second one of those Ren 2 damage 3 ones. Can be good. But if you also think about like this is also very close to how much value you have in a Relic Envoy and his command core is 290 points. So that's 60 less points than this. And it's essentially like, what is it? 5 plus 18. It's a lot more wounds, and it's going to do a lot of stuff for your army. That is essentially like, if you just wanted like this really cool, companion unit, like the companions for me aren't doing enough to warrant the 350. But it's not to say that they aren't doing anything, they are still a separate unit. 11 wounds on a 3-up save can go and take over an objective. It's kind of neat,
So let's maybe, now that we have both Callis, Toll, and friends, what's the unit good at? If I'm thinking about spending the 350, I'm getting essentially 2 heroes with a bunch of extra troops. I'm getting some interesting rules like Deep Strike, a 5-up ward on those heroes, the auto slay with Callis, no, Toll, whichever one has the actions. Which one has the stake? It's Toll. Toll has the stake. So either way, you're getting like the auto slay rule. You're obviously getting double damage from wizards and demons with Callis and Toll, and there is a lot of attack profiles there. They're not specifically to melee. They're both, shooting and melee. So lots of good opportunities to take down those wizards and demons, which is very popular right now in the current season and or the meta. What else do you get? You obviously can ignore those negative modifiers, which is nice. You might be deploying in cover, so you get the +1 save. There's a lot of really interesting rules.
Okay, so actually there's one thing to think about, I guess. It's the fact that normally the intent of Cities really was to have this like castle faction, right? But if you have your whole castle, it's a slow-moving castle. You don't have a lot of board presence. But Toll and his companions technically would be that forward. It doesn't actually need any support from the rest of your army because you have the heroes, you have this unrendable save, you're starting on a terrain piece. You technically don't need the +1 aura because you will have a cover save. And if you're a defender, or I mean, if you've set terrain and there's like a terrain piece on an objective and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to put my guys there. That's 350 points of self-sufficient guys on an objective. So it's if the rest of your army is like wanting to stay really close together and you don't want to buy a Smash Griffin for some reason, this is a great unit for just like it gets 21 wounds and it's just going to sit there and they'll be fine. They can rally themselves on 6s. Kind of neat.
Kyle, why would I take this unit?
Just for flavor. But no,
like,
it really would be the answer would be just to have a unit that can operate solo. That's about it.
Yeah, I think what you have is you have a really look for 350, you're getting 2 heroes and 11 extra wounds. You've got the 5-up war. There's a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of stuff between ignoring negative saves, wards, deep striking. It's a nice little bag of stuff. I think the challenge is that is competing with a lot of other rules. You've talked a little bit about Neve already. You know, I've talked a little bit about Hexbane Hunters. We've already talked about Daddy and Daughter, Darelia and Galen. There's a lot of people who are competing in this same space. And Kyle and I were talking before we started recording is if you really value the silent as death deep striking, I could get Caneri. I could get tree revs. I can get other things to come into play. If I want the ward, you've obviously talked about the Pontifex. Like if you want certain rules, there are already things in cities that offers them to you. So I think we probably both agree, interesting set of rules, not an auto include. And if you're going to a tournament, would you take this unit as a cities player? And is it the most optimum? I think we probably both agree that it's probably not the most optimum, not the most, it's not a broken set of rules, but they're fun. They're interesting.
If all of those were damage 2, like if all the ones were 2, I would 100% say this was, I would take this unit, right? Like it was just, the companions needed to do more for me to do. It's close, right? And yeah, that's my opinion on it.
I agree. No, I actually agree with you. I think Callis and Toll, really interesting, add a lot of value. Then you come to this and it's like, oh, I feel like I'm paying like the deep strike tax and the ignore negative saves tax. And I think that you're right. If that damage profile was a little bit better, or maybe they counted as, extra on an objective or something, I think yes. But probably there's too many things competing in the same space.
If even they had the thing that like gave Toll, you know how like you shouldn't have Black Talon's companions near her, but if she is, they pass off wounds, right? If Toll's companions at least even did that, right, then I would say that these units that can be together and then it's just a blight of wounds and you have 21 wounds, like Toll matters, right? If Toll makes it to round 5, he could win the game just murdering people, right? But the companions aren't actually saving him from Toll or from anything. So that's yeah, he needs better friends.
Well, you say that, but what you don't know is they are also the saviors of the Cinderfall. Now, context. Cities of Sigmar people, you can't use these rules. So maybe block out your ears for a couple of minutes before we get into the other cities rules. But this is for people who are Sylvaneth and KO and Stormcast and everyone else who is Order that's not cities. If you are Order and not cities, you can get the Regiment of Renown. The 2 special rules that you get, one is duty bound. So when a friendly Saviours of Cinderfall unit is wholly within 6 inches of an objective, you add 1 to the save roll for attacks that target that unit and add 1 to the ward roll for that unit. In addition, sentence to death at the start of the battle, pick 1 enemy unit on the battlefield that's going to be sentenced to death. Now, attacks made with melee weapons by a friendly Saviours of Cinderfall, Callis Toll, and friends, that target that enemy unit scores 2 hits on a 2+, regardless of any modifiers, both positive and negative. Now, does that justify the 350?
Yes. Like I honestly do think that if this was I actually think the reason why the damage profile on the companions isn't that great is probably because a sentence to death was, they probably like thought that, oh, it would be really cool is if we had a unit that did ABCD And then they wrote the unit like, wait a second, if it's going to be this good, it needs to be this expensive, and it needs to have less damage, right? And so I honestly think Saviours of Cinderfall, like the Regiment Renown, is really, really good in, say, something like, oh, if I'm playing Fire Slayers and I can't get up the board very fast and I don't want to throw myself over there, I can just put them, like if you think about the game, generally turns into this, you have like, you're playing a 3-lane system where your army is going somewhere, right? And then you're going to have your main army, your flank, or one way or another. And then when you're deploying your army, your opponent has to like put stuff of like basically equal points value on one part of the board. At 350 points, what is equal points value that's actually going to beat Toll and his companions is like something that your opponent doesn't want to commit to, right? So with a 4-up ward, the math becomes much more of like, okay, this unit is closer not to 10 wounds, more like 20, and then you have the +1 save aura, or I mean, it just becomes terrifying, right? Like, and since this is at the start of the battle, you choose this after your opponent has deployed. So if your opponent has placed a unit that's going to try and fight Toll and his companions, you just go, okay, I'm gonna hit on 2s against that unit. So you're just like, okay, well, now they have to shift something else over there to go fight that, and making that decision might lose them the game, or they might, Toll and his companions will score. I mean, it is 2 different units, so like the battle tactics you get out of like either baiting and trapping, you don't need to fight, right? If you're in combat with Toll and his companions, that's bait and trap for free. Or if you need to surround, the unit, the companions you don't care about, they're just going to run off, and or Toll himself is going to go. Like the unit becomes so much better in any other army. It's just like, the duty bound rule is nuts. So I think here this is a good unit. Like I saw some people talking about how the unit is kind of like a better Gotrek. Not that Gotrek is bad, but that this unit you can kind of just put off to its own. The insta-kill rule means that your opponent doesn't want to put something like a hero to go and fight them, because you're okay, I'll just kill the hero, right? And then because it has the forward deploy, you don't have the same issue that like Gotrek has, where he's just running up the board the whole time. And then comparing this to the Black Talons in other armies, while Neve is really good at doing one thing, she's not going to want to stay in one place because of the nature of how the return goes. But Callis and Toll can go and charge an objective somewhere, and then they're going to stay there and, maybe score that for you while you literally don't care what they're doing with the rest of your army. It's just in the cities you care, because it's like every single person who's there is there for a reason, So.
And that's why we didn't talk about these rules until later on. So with the frame of cities, we understand Callis, Toll, and friends. Interesting rules, bring some different things to the party. There are already other sources for a lot of those things that we can draw in. Yeah, we don't have the insta-kill, but otherwise a lot of these things we can draw upon from our allies, coalition, and or other units. Maybe the last question I've got for you about the Saviours of Cinderfall. And by the way, they are 1 drop. Yes, they're also, if you take them, you can't take any other allies. So just that's a traditional Regiment of Renown set of rules. So that doesn't change. Are there any particular order armies that you think would benefit from the Saviours of Cinderfall more than others?
If you think about... So remind me, if you go back to Toll, up to the top, it says, or actually, no, it is the companions.
The companions, yep.
Yeah. So during deployment, instead of setting up this unit, you come out of a terrain piece, right?
Yeah, correct. You've got to come out. Yeah, you've got to come out within 3 inches of a terrain feature or a faction terrain.
And Sylvaneth placed their terrain before this, right? So, if you're playing Sylvaneth, you have complete control over where the terrain piece goes. I don't know if you can still. I mean, you used to be able to place it outside your territory. I don't know if you still can, but if you could, I really want Callis and Toll to be here, and you put the companions. They come out of a terrain feature, like right there.
But do you need it for Sylvaneth? Like that's actually funny you mentioned Sylvaneth because that was one of the people I thought would least need it. I'm thinking Fire Slayers. I'm thinking
Fire Slayers is the first one.
Yeah.
For sure, because they can go off and do the thing. But the reason why I like it in Sylvaneth is only because it's like when you're making Sylvaneth lists, it comes down to like activation orders. You want a unit that usually you have a unit that goes in, hits something and gets out, or if it goes in and needs to stay there, then it doesn't really want to stay there because then you're not using your lateness ability. But with the companions, you don't really care so much about activation order. You can take fights with this unit and not need to worry about getting out. It's not too fragile and it's not slow like Karath hunters are. I mean, slow as in like you're not taking Belthanos, right? But so it's a unit that will hold an objective. Specifically, I mean, that the problem I usually have when I'm playing Sylvaneth is like, I want to take fights, I want to leave, but I also want to stay. And then how do I have board presence when do I spam dryads, right? Is this going to do more than 30 dryads? I don't know, but like at least you don't have to teleport to get there, right? You just start there. So that's one unit. Just because of holding an objective matters. It's the argument for both Sylvaneth and KO, right?
Agreed.
Not that I couldn't get there, but I had to hold it.
I would agree there because you're not relying on strike and fade or just committing one unit and then you don't want to get hit with the other unit. That yes, I agree with you. I can see that value there. Anyone else you think kind of value would benefit from this? And again, this goes back to the argument of do I take this over Neve? Do I take this over Gotrek? Do I take this over? And that's a really challenging question and why I'm asking you what are the types of armies that need it. Like my Daughters of Cain.
So,
I don't think my Daughters needs this. I mean, I get a damn durable unit. Don't get me wrong. I would love that. They're an army full of glass cannon and, but I've got the deep striking from the Caneri. So if I just want the deep striking, I've got really cheap Caneri that, support my battle tactics. Stormcast, not really. I mean, again, they're pretty tanky. They can be tanky, especially if you take, Gardas or they can come from wherever. What else?
I really like in Deepkin, actually.
I was going to ask you about Deepkin. I was literally about to say, what do you think of Deepkin? That's an interesting one because everyone's spamming the hell out of sharks. This is an interesting one.
I mean, I always play against Aaron Elias. Elias doesn't play sharks. He tends to play everything that's not sharks, right? And so when I play against him, he usually has a unit. Maybe he'll be taking the bow guys with the dogs that come a part of it. But the thing that matters is that like you have this unit that has a 3-up unrendable that you're just going to put in front of your opponent. And then Forgotten Nightmares means that they literally cannot shoot anything except for this 3-up unrendable unit that's forward deployed. And if you go and charge the 3-up unrendable unit, then like eels or thralls are going to countercharge you. I mean, it's just a unit that you can't really ignore because you can't really see anything that's not this unit. And it's this like, while normally eels might provide the sort of like, eels are on a 4-up unrendable, which is kind of like the difference, right? The 3-up unrendable just makes it so much better for, this unit needs to survive for two shooting phases, maybe 3, and
only the heroes though. That's only the heroes. Just to keep in mind, just because like Toll's companions don't have the ward, but I hear what you're saying, having the 4-up ward on the
no. Sorry, I wasn't saying anything about the ward. I was saying the eels have a 4-up ethereal normally.
Oh yes, sorry.
Okay. In Deepkin, normally you if you're playing, you're not usually taking allies, and say that you were just pushing up an eel unit to like screen for your army, you're kind of just hoping that 4-up ethereal saves you. On a 3-up ethereal, your opponent's just like throwing dice at that point, right? Like sometimes you'll miss, but or sometimes you'll fail the saves. But usually, you can also kind of like place them in such a way that after you lose X amount of models, now Toll is in front. And I mean, Forgotten Nightmares doesn't actually apply to them. You can choose, right? right? But it's still a unit that like, oh shoot, this is 21 wounds that's just sitting on this objective, you know, and then the Deepkin player didn't have to commit too much to control.
Yeah. But then my argument would be, what about the Stormcast Chariot, which would be like half the price? Yes, it has doesn't have the ethereal essentially, but it sure as hell is cheap, fast, will take the punch. Again, I think this is the conflicting thing that I have around this unit. I love the idea. I'd be happy to run Callis and Toll. It'd be fascinating when I take the Saviours of the Cinderfall, but there's a lot of units. Neve, there are so many units out there that I could, like, this is almost a Mega Gargant. I could ally in the Kraken Eater almost, and increase, like that could be the same thing. I think this is where you've got to be really clear of what you're after and what it brings to the table and what's unique about it. And I'm not saying that what you just said is wrong. I think it's just a really challenging question when I'm allocating 350 points. I need to be trading up. I need to make the most of this unit. I think we both agree it's a great unit. We like both the Callis and Toll and friends. We love them in regiments of renown. It's the dollar value that we're putting to this unit, and what could I spend with this with an equivalent with this unit? And I don't think we have the right answer just yet. I think it's like, we like it, but
yeah, you're really forcing it. You're really forcing it. So I mean, I agree. Like if you're taking him, you have to force it, unfortunately. But it is more to say that like it's not like what do you call it? The scriptum mortis, right? Like it's not just a useless unit, you know.
I tried when that scriptum mortis came. I tried so hard to be optimistic and positive. Like, yeah, like this could. Like, no, it's
like I run, you know, a bunch of Craven Throne. I was doing this before, like when the unit first came out, when it was like expensive. Like I can make Craven Throne work, right? The Scriptum Mortis had to be the worst war scroll I think that's ever new that came out, right? Like, what is this doing? You know, this is not, that's not for them. The Callis and Toll are not Scriptum Mortis level, not Sorceress on Black Dragon level, I should say.
Well, it's funny. It's funny actually because I was playing Daughters of Cain at the time. So like the High Gladiatrix, I'm like, yes, this is the greatest hero ever. I'm so happy. This is like, and like I tried to have that same optimism and enthusiasm with the Scriptum Mortis, and it didn't happen. But to round this conversation off before we get into a cities, is there anything else you would say about Callis Toll Friends, Regiment of Renowned? Not a bad unit, not a auto include unit, bring some interesting things to the party. Question is it adding value to your overall strategy? That's up to you to decide.
Yeah, I would just say that I'm gonna try it 1 or 2 times before I have I'm gonna say definitely no to them. You know, I'll give every unit like 1 shot, right? I'll play against the Angry Welshman at some point, and he'll get his what do you call it, Reapers of Vengeance points off for killing Callis and Toll. It'll be great, you know. You know, I think the unit, if it went down 50 points, it's a lot of points to go down, but if it went down 50 points, this becomes a lot more of something I would consider. At 25, it's a maybe. At 350, I really do think it does not compete with the other options. Like while it will do its job for 350, if you're really looking for something most of the time that doesn't include the deep strike, I mean, like the specific armies that are very limited in the number of allies it can take, maybe that's a lot more interesting, but I can't really think of anything besides maybe Fire Slayers that's limited to only Stormcast and KO, you know. So it is a stretch. It is a stretch, but the rule is good, you know. So those are my thoughts on it.
I think cities, I would love to see the points difference. I think around the 270 to 300 mark in cities, because I'm not getting these rules, I'd be much more comfortable. Or give me these rules and I'll happily pay them for 350 in cities. But to not get this, it's actually one of the first regiments of renown where I'm like, I really want that. But hey, And to kind of round this all up, you have given us as an example, we won't go into too much detail, but overall, if you were thinking about how you're making Callis and Toll and companions work, why would you pick Hallowheart? And like, what's the overall high level discussion around this particular list idea?
So there's two main ways you can play this list, right? You can have your Griffin on one side, and then you have Callis and Toll on the other, and then you have the rest of your castle, right? And you just push up the middle, and then you have your two flank parts just going. They will almost always trade up, especially the Griffin. Smash Griffin will always trade up into something. And then Callis and Toll will either hold the line or, they'll at least stand there, right? And count as 10 on an objective. Alternatively, with this kind of like castle formation, you are already paying for all the stuff that normally keeps human cities on the board. So if you put Toll's companions like in the front, and then you have your steel helms on the side, and then you have your Wilder Core and like all your meaty insides, right? The reason why you'd play Hallowheart is because you're kind of hoping for your opponent to come to your castle, and you're just going to cast Blizzard on them. You just need to hold the walls until you get the Blizzard off, right? So that's kind of like the high level of like you have the option to play wide with Callis and Toll and the Griffin, but if you're playing on a 3 objective mission, you really could just play Castle Crashers, where you just run up with the companions, and you can counter punch with with Toll. And then you have the Wilder Core that's just going to murder anything that you just need something that's going to hold the line in front of the Wilder Core, and Toll's companions will do it for a turn or two. Maybe they'll do it for 3 or 4. I mean, with double command core, you're healing a lot of wounds on the on that 3 ethereal. The only thing to think about though is that like a steam tank is essentially the same thing as a 3 unrendable. Right, because there's very few things that's going to be rend 4. But if you have your +1 to save, and then you're all defense, and then you're on a 2-up, so then you're on a 0 to get to that 3. You need a rend 3, right? So the only thing that like matters at that point is like, oh, I'm not putting a steam tank commander there, so that Catacross doesn't get extra attacks. Like that's the only interaction I can think of where that specific number matters. But I mean, it is the fact that they do count as 10 on objectives, and the fact that you really don't care if this unit retreats. Like bait and trap, when you're thinking about what you're actually putting as your screen, a steam tank doesn't want to retreat unless you're playing in Tempest Eye, and even then you kind of don't want to. So the unit does have a place. It can do things, but I definitely did, like when you said, hey, write me a list of Callis and Toll, I started with Callis and Toll and then built around it. It wasn't like I'm going to write a list and then add them in later, because it'll never happen.
Yeah, you've got to really build around it. And before we get into the real rules, the normal rules, I just want to point out the irony of it being in Hallowheart despite being wizard and demon hunters. So we'll just turn a blind eye to our own people, and we will go and hunt the demons and wizards of our enemies, especially those Blizzard wizards.
Exactly.
But there has been a lot of changes for cities, which I wanted to contextualize and kind of unpack a little bit. So first things first, Generals Handbook has had some additional rules. The Wizard Finders of Antor has gotten a nice little boost. There has been a new battle tactic, but you probably are going to have a wizard, so that's not going to really be relevant to us. A couple of endless spell changes as well. Has any of this impacted you? Has it increased the value in your eye of, let's say, Wizard Finders? Or has any of these rules impacted you at all, Kyle?
I think Wizard Finders was the single most important change in regards to like positive change, right? I think the fact that Gravetide did not go up, I'm happy it didn't, but it is like aggressively costed at 30 points, right? I was playing against my roommate Shane, and he was playing Zinch, and he just put a Gravetide forward and wiped out half of my Wilder Core It's pretty gnarly. But like, I had the chance of rolling a 5-up. You know, there was magical defense there. I totally had blanked on dying to that because like, oh, you can't cast spells, you can't see me. Like, oh, I can cast an endless spell, and you're just oh crap, you know, like you totally can cast an endless spell. The 5-up matters, right? And then it was always a good, we call it battalion just for the +1 attack. There are things like Arcan. There are things like it was.
I was never sold on it because, you know, the race to the bottom, like everyone's going either battle regiment to get the lowest drops possible. They're chucking wizards in for getting the extra primal dice, or they're going for an extra prayer or spell or something from Warlord, right? So if I think about my own lists, Wizard Finders was one of those ones that I would chuck in at the end if I had a couple of spare units that could allow me to do it. I never built around it, but this one now feels like it's worth considering over, you know, Line Breaker or some other type of, you know, battalion. It's never going to be beating me for Battle Rage or Warlord, but my gosh, its value has increased now exponentially.
I agree with that. There's specific armies too that I think it's much better in. For example, I really do like it in armies that have a lot of models that have 1 attack. Like for example, skeletons in Soulblight benefit a lot from Wizard Finders. The dogs, the Wilder Corps in cities, especially actually the Command Corps in cities with Wizard Finders. At 3 attacks on the charge with the Whisper Blade against an enemy wizard caster, you're gonna just kill it, right? There's specific armies where I'm gonna be like, okay, I really want this. And since we're talking about cities, I actually end up taking Wizard Finders like even before the buff, like it just got better. But I will definitely agree with you that like in other armies where you were always going to kill the thing when you touched it anyway, it didn't matter. But so yeah, that one's probably the biggest one for me. The only the only army that I play that doesn't have a caster is KO, right? Like, so the battle tactic was pretty much the okay, that's nice, you know.
It's a nice to have, but if you've got the choice of getting yourself a wizard, you know, Cities obviously has filled with good wizards. So even if you don't take Hallowheart, there's so many wizards in your faction that I don't even. You've got to try really hard to get a Nullstone Adornment in a Cities list. So the other changes is the fact that there's been some point adjustments, which I find fascinating. You know, the Great Cannon going down, the Warforger going down, the Hulk War Hulk going down, Talia going down, the Wilder Corpse have gone down. Don't know why, but they've gone down. But the Steam Tanks, the Steam Tank Commander, and the Free Guild Command Corps going up in points. In addition, I think something that I think is maybe the most impactful is going to, well, the most impactful for some builds is going to be the Warforgers rules. And that has really significantly impacted the Fusilier builds. So, Kyle, tell me more about when you read the Battlescroll. How do you take this all in?
It definitely changes the identity of the army, in my opinion. Like, what the rule was before basically solidified this idea that you're playing a castle army that has all these cool tower shields. They're going to be moving up the board, kind of like systematically shooting stuff, and then you're going to be like doing mortals, basically. Not a huge fan of the change personally, but the difference meant that you have to like reinvent kind of like what your image of what this army is doing, right? You're never going to be in range of the horses. That's not gonna matter. The steel helms don't have enough attacks that it's going to matter. Like, okay, well, cool, I'm hitting none sixes sometimes, but I shouldn't have had to cast a spell on a wizard. Well, maybe, I mean, casting a spell on a wizard is fine as long as that wizard was 90 points, right? But the +1 to save, I understand why he's more expensive for that. But the really big change here, though, actually, is just the fact that because Wilder Core went down and the spell went the way it did, the only effective unit that the spell is on now is Wildercore, which is kind of interesting. You still kind of can get this castle cities thing going on, but it's not going to be the same as like Fusils are just not doing the damage that they did before. The range still matters, but I've found in my playtesting that anyone who actually cares about getting shot has rules against getting shot.
Mm.
You know what I mean, the only one that doesn't have rules is Skaven. So that's really good against them. But Deepkin, they'll have a way to stop it. Crow Boys, they'll have a way to stop it. Goblins come back. They have a 4-up rally. Everything else has a 4-up rally. So if you don't do fatal damage from 30 inches away, then most units in the game. Not most units in the game, but most armies that are competitive nowadays can deal with attritional damage. And Fusils losing that extra bit of damage means they're not going to win the attritional game. So that's kind of how I see the spell change.
So let's break this down for a second. Fusiliers were quite popular, and people took units of 20, people took units of 30. I think there was a mad lad at LVO who took 70 in his list. Absolute, what a Chad performance. I don't know how it went, but 70 Fusiliers is kind of nightmare type stuff. Do you think we are about to enter a world where, look, are Fusiliers useless?
No. Very close, but they're not quite useless. As in the context of the other shooting units in the book, they're still better than Iron Drakes. They're going to be doing more than Dark Shards, right? The difference actually is the fact that the human orders are so good. Return Fire single-handedly makes Fusils still relevant, but the price is what kind of like, if they were 10 points cheaper, I would still take 20 of them, right? They still cement your grand strat. They're going to have 2 banners in the back of your army that are going to get you banners held high, right? They have the potential of projecting power, and it matters. Like, it matters a lot not having to move out of your deployment zone and still being able to score points. Forcing your opponent to come to you, it's really important in like Hallowheart or in Lethis, when you need them to be within 12 inches for you to do your burst damage. But directly competing with Wildercore for only 18%. It's only 6 inches less range, but the sheer amount of damage you get out of it from the Wildercore, and like the fact that it's a hybrid unit, means that because Wildercore exists, and they can still benefit from the melee like side of all of the human orders. So to talk real quick about the human orders, we'll do it later, but the reason why steam tanks were the best unit, in my opinion, the best human unit, is that they benefited really well from all 5 orders. I was kind of telling this to Gavin beforehand. We were like, hey, like the reason, because he was watching me play a game on TTS when the book kind of first came out. The first day I played 16 tanks, and he hopped in the Discord call and he's like, Kyle, what are you doing? That's a terrible unit. I'm like, you don't understand. Steam tanks, look at the war scroll. Everything on this is good. It's not amazing. It's just good. But when you compare it to all the other cities units, it can countershoot. The suppressing fire, you're not losing too much from putting everything into one thing. Counter charge, it's going to be run 2, it does collision mortals. It's going to stay in someone's face, right? The +3 movement matters because you're going from 8 to 11 inches. This thing's going really fast for an artillery piece. And then the +1 attack, like at 7 attacks, at rend 1 damage 2 is going to kill something, right? Like every single order mattered. And that's why I think that while steam tanks individually were not a scary unit, people looked at the war scroll and said, this is okay. It's just, it got so much value out of everything that the army had to offer. Like if you think that your allegiance ability is your orders, and the best unit that benefits, the unit that benefits from all of them is the steam tank, that's why it probably went up in points, right? But that's why I'm confused that the Wildercore went down, because that's the other unit that also benefits from all 5 orders. Actually, even more so, because the +1 attack makes so much of a difference on the on how many mortals you're going to be getting from the spell. So yeah, I thought that was kind of gnarly. Like that unit, like it's very good now.
Yeah, like the Will the Corp hunters, when you look at the 130 versus, is it Steelhelm's 100? Though 90, 100?
Yeah, 30.
100, right? So
Yeah.
so for 30 extra points, you get 1 extra wound, you get the pre-game move, you get the shooting and the melee. Is the saves the same? I was just having a look to see.
No, it's 4 to
Probably not,
5.
right?
It actually
It's
is a
4 to
very
5.
big difference.
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
sense-
So
So you go ahead.
no. Just like it's not like a comparable, like they are, just so much better. They do bring a lot more to the party, and as you mentioned, they benefit from the orders a lot more. I certainly were very confused on why they went down, but in the context of me running this at a teams tournament, I'm absolutely very happy, and to offset some of the points increases.
Yes.
Without going too much into the Wilder Corp hunters, obviously I guess what I wanted to say was Fusiliers, they got impacted. They're not completely useless. You could still run a unit of 30 and do fine. Obviously, you're not getting the mortals now from the Warforger, but it's not going to be as efficient as you used to get them, which may get you questioning, do I go all in and spend 30, or do I maybe look at diversifying into other things, Steam Tank, while the Corp Hunters, something else?
I think personally, I stop at 20. Never take 10, because for 10, they're not doing anything. 30, unless you're taking the command trade, which is not a very good command trade, you shouldn't do 30. Now, 20 does this thing where it's like it's not too many points. It solidifies your grand strat, and it can provide cover fire. Like it does. So the thing about steam tanks is that you, for the kind of counter fire order, you need to be within 3 inches of the unit that's going to do the counter firing, right? Your steam tank doesn't take up that much space. It's not covering a huge amount of space in your army. The fusils, you can string them out really far, and then cover a lot of the units that don't want to get shot. And then you don't even need to have counterfire. Just the threat of counterfire means that you're kind of doubling your shooting phase, right? So the unit is still useful, but it's just not going to pick up your opponent, and it's not going to do fatal damage. It's just going to deter shooting.
Correct. Which may mean that if you are requiring mortal wounds, you might get yourself a Hurricanum. You might be looking at other things where maybe the unit of 30 may not be the most valuable investment. Talk to me a little bit about the other points decreases, right? So the Great Cannon is something that we want to work, but at 150 points, it was a bit too much. The War Hulk, the same thing. We love the idea. Again, at 150, it was too many points. And Talia, wonderful model. I think we all want Talia to work. Locked into Hammerhall makes it a little bit hard because most people are not playing a Hammerhall. They're playing Misthaven or Hallowheart or some other type of build. Do you think these points enough get you considering bringing them into into your lists? And if they are, why? Or if not, why not?
Okay, so for cannon, I have one list, we'll see later, where I think one cannon fits in a battle regiment. Just because of the slot, it kind of works out. It's not a terrible unit. The what do you call it? The utility you get out of it is great. I actually think 4 cannons, there's a world where that is not a terrible idea. The math kind of like, it checks out to like, if you're shooting something over 2 turns and you can do it from really far away, it's not horrible. But it really does need to go down 10 more points before I think that this is a really, really good unit, right? Because the steam tank went up, the comparison for the gun profile, like if you think about it, you're paying, was it 110 points less, but getting the same gun from the cannon. And we saw how well that 6 steam guns or steam tanks had killed the what do you call it? The zombie list, right? Tongguan zombie list. So it's not that it's not possible. It's just, it's not quite there yet. The Hulk, I actually think personally, I was running it with Talia, when the book first came out, and I thought the Hulk was perfectly fine at 150. Only because if you look at the War Scroll for it, you get 8 wounds. You're going to be in your save war. It's going to be on a 2-up save. The guy is just, he's handing out orders, and he can countercharge because you just put him at the front of your army. And you just throw him at something. He was pretty solid for what he was doing, right? At 130, you're getting to the territory now where you can start to spam multiple of them, and then you get a lot of what do you call it? The long rifle's ability to break cohesion becomes a lot more likely when you start taking 2 or 3 of them, and then your opponent has to respect it, which means that like the way they deploy completely changes, right? Or if they don't, then you just break cohesion. You take first, and you just okay. Well, you don't even have to take first. Sorry, your opponent moves, and then you shoot one model off, and they lose half of a unit, right? Like I think the Warhulk is really good at 130.
Is that the value though? Like, is that the value? Because you've mentioned the cohesion breaking a few times now. Is that where you're getting the value? Because the attack profile's fine, and you know you don't expect something massive for a hero, a sub commander hero. He's got 8 wounds. It has some interesting attack profiles. Is that where you're getting the value? Like, let's say I took that off you. Let's say cohesion breaking couldn't happen. Is the Fusilier Warhulk as valuable?
It depends on how much you value the defensive profile of the unit. When the unit first came out, I didn't realize it had a 3-up base save. So from a 3-up to a 2-up, basically this unit is always going to be on 2-up save because he's hanging out in your castle. A 2-up save for 8 wounds for 130 points. What is comparable to that profile? Right? Like that is a hero that can find his tower, right? The fact that you could take this in Deepkin and then just put 2 of them in front of your army and then finest tower one of them and all out defense the other, and you have 2 units that are unrendable against shooting, and your opponent can only shoot this. Like, I think this unit is actually kind of insane, like just from the defensive profile alone. Ignore everything else on the War Scroll. And then thinking about the unit in cities, let's pretend that we didn't like Fusils, and you just took the Warhulk, and the Warhulk just had suppressing fire, and so you could just give something fight last, or let's say your opponent shoots you and you counter shoot, and then you roll a 6 and you just break cohesion, right? Like, the unit does so much, and it's another one of those units that I say that just benefits from all 5 orders. That you just like, you're getting a lot of value out of the sub-factions, sorry, the allegiance abilities that you don't normally think about when you're looking at the War Scroll. It's like, oh, he's got 3 attacks, a Ren 2 D3, it's not going to do anything. Or, oh, he's got his shooting gun is not that bad. But if you have a gun that can shoot, it's guaranteed 24 inches plus D6 because he can apply the buff to himself. And you just have this 130 point unit that's projecting power without having to leave your deployment zone, that can project power in a meaningful way. Like, the thing that I have about Fusils is that they're not going to do meaningful damage for their points value, but a single 6, even the concept that the 6 might go through and break cohesion, means your opponent needs to respect the fact that you have the unit, So I actually think the Warhulk is a really, really good unit. The only reason that I don't usually take it in my lists is that I'm going for a specific set of 6 heroes almost every time that I'm building a list. But if you aren't doing that, if you're even taking if you're taking dwarves or if you're taking elves, taking a single Warhulk is a good idea just because you can get access to these human orders that make a big difference.
It is an interesting operator with its 3-up saves, 8 wounds, and then the movement's not the greatest, like movement 5. But to your point, it's got shooting, it's got combat. The shooting will do some chip damage. The mace will do some decent attacks. It's an interesting unit. It is a really interesting unit. Probably longer than I thought we'd talk about the Warhawk.
Sorry.
No, not at all. I think it's we all made and the reason I ask you this is because we all made assumptions when we very first saw this. I know when I looked at the city's battalion, I'm like, oh, I like the idea, but the fact that the Great Cannon was 150, the Warhawk was 150, then you add your Fusiliers who were 150 at the time. It's like, oh, this is a really expensive battalion. Thanks, but no thanks. Now that we've had some adjustments, it might be worth reconsidering. And if you've got that 130 points, or you used to run a double command corp and now your list is over and you're like, what can I use? What can I put into my list? This might be a viable option. And that's the whole point of this discussion, is to say, let's revisit this. Now things have gone up and gone down. I think Talia is a very fascinating unit. My challenge with Talia is that I could just get another Griffin. I think ultimately, if I had one Griffin, I think I value two Griffins. But in saying that, recently at the where is it? The 1 second, I just want to give the appropriate Geordie, who played at the a particular event, Warlord Weekend, which was I think like a 30-player or 40-player event. Oh no, it was a 100-player event. He came like second with Italia and Free Guild Marshal on general. So there's lists, but I just value a double Griffin more than a Griffin and a Manticore.
I will say that I've run Talia, I think, at like 6 games of RTTs, and my experiences with her, like the bar was kind of low, to be honest. I was like, okay, I wasn't expecting much out of her, but the fight last monstrous action makes such a big difference on a unit that will always countercharge, right? I've found that Talia's ability is kind of weird at first. Like, oh, I have to have Talia in combat, and then the unit then Brawling has to be in combat. But if you just have that as your plan, that you're just screening with your horses, and you're just always going to countercharge with Talia, and also the fact that she can always give herself 2 orders, right? It actually adds up. She's never actually disappointed for me in regards to the amount of damage that she will do at a given time. And then even just placing her somewhere, and then the horses like redeploying to be around her, or like you move your army around Talia, or Talia moves to like take advantage of where your army is placed. And if you 3d6 cast the countercharge on her, right? Talia stops opponent's monsters from wanting to engage whatever is you like. The monstrous action makes all the difference. I agree that the Smash Griffin will be a generalist better into most things, but countercharge since she doesn't have countercharge fight first, countercharge fight last is just like, like, oh shoot, my opponent has to think about that now, right? Like, oh wait, maybe I don't put Usher on here, right? Because he could just die. So it's kind of gnarly.
And the rally in combat on a 4-up is brutal. And I know when I've looked at Talia, it's when I've had a very Cavalier-focused list, whether it's Excelsius or Misthaven, if I'm running like a block of 10 and 2 units of 5 or multiple 5s, that's where really Talia kind of comes to life for me. Even though she's Hammerhall, like, that to me is where I see a lot of value. But in the average list, where it might be Fusiliers, it might be steam tanks, clearly not as valuable as Smash Griffin.
But it's actually in double command core is also kind of funny, because rallying command core on 4-ups can make your opponent concede.
Type of stuff to make you cry.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd add at this particular point? I mean, I think there's definitely a good opportunity for us to revisit our lists and think about where the points have adjusted, especially those who are on the fringe of 2K that are now above 2K, and like, how do I bring things back?
So we should talk about command core just a little bit. I have played so many.
Oh, we haven't talked yet. Yeah, we haven't talked command core. Sorry. Yes, let's talk command core.
Command core at 200. Is that where it should be? Probably. Should it be 210 to stop allies? Probably. Do I think that it's a good unit at 200/210? It is painful. I've cried every time I've put this in a list lately, just because it's like, while I talked earlier about the Warhawk. The points to defense profile ratio matters a lot. Like they're still undercosted a little bit at 18 wounds on a 4-up save, usually a 3-up because you're in your auras, right? For 200 points. That's like better than a unit of 20 steel helms. But the difference really is the fact that 200 points to your army is not ever actively contributing to you winning the game. It contributes completely to your opponents not winning the game because you stop attritional damage with the healing. You can stop, losing your army to the icon that makes your whole army run away. You can stop. You can actually get your charges off, and then you can stop Supreme Overlord or the Blight Krieg, right? Like the unit does a lot to make your opponent stop from winning the game, but at 200 points, you're playing your 1,800 points or even your 1,600 point army versus your opponent. Like, so this is going back to like the Be'lakor slash what do you call it? The Eclipse. What's the Lumineth spell? Twilight Eclipse?
Total Eclipse?
Total Eclipse, right? Total Eclipse, when you're playing against it, feels brutal. You're just like, oh my god, why does this spell exist? If you play as Lumineth, if you don't ever cast that spell, you instantly lose the game. Like it's just like you don't have the way of like dealing with your opponent allowing doing all this stuff, right? In the case of Be'lakor, his profile sucks, right? Like he always fails to do anything. But the reason why he's pointed at 300 whatever is because he stops your opponent's 700 points of units doing anything for X amount of turns, right? That's what Command Corps do, is that they hope to stop your opponent from their equivalent amount of points of like winning the game against you. The problem is in cities, you don't have like you have 2 or 3 hammers, and when those hammers fail, like if the Smash Griffin dies or if the Cav hits something and then fail to kill it, like the reason why Wildercore worked really well, especially with steam tanks and fusils, is that you could project power not in your turn without losing your ability to project power, right? But since Cities has moved towards this like hybrid melee / all melee army, you no longer have the ability to just sit there. You have to project power with your units, right? And Command Corps kind of take away your ability to do that with their points value. And I'm not saying at all that they're a bad unit, because they're still a phenomenal unit, but I've found that it's more of like a hindrance to myself in list building when I'm taking them versus like if I was taking a Hydra, right? For 20 points less, the Hydra can be active anywhere on the board that's not in my army. And just when I was talking about flanks and how trading up matters, right? At 20 steel helms, you can put that on a side of the board and then just not die and win an objective. You cannot take 6 Command Corps and put them to a side of the board and hope to win, right? Like it's just not going to happen, right? And so I find that spending 400 points on a unit that will not win you the game, as in like, if you compare this at 400 points, you compare this to Catacross, right? Catacross, when the rest of his army is dead, will still win the game because of the way his profile works. Like if he starts taking damage, he can single-handedly, especially Morris Praetorians, he can win the game by himself. If I have lost my Smash Griffin and my Wildercore at the bottom 2 for any reason, I have to concede. There's nothing else I can do. Wildercore will not win you the game by themselves. You might still have 1,000 points of your army, but it doesn't matter because this unit is not actually going to win you the game. You know, that's just how I feel about it.
No. And it's very similar to how I feel in Gits, for example, where I've got Sneaky Snufflers and I've also got the Gobblepalooza, who are really active support pieces like, Scragrod as well. And if you start spending too many pieces on support, yes, they are a force multiplier, but you really got to get the most out of the rest of the unit. And I'm glad that you kind of refer to this. So, folks, if you're wondering why Kyle keeps talking about 400 points, it's because if you've looked at historically the most popular builds of late, it has been double command corp. So really people are taking 2, and that's 400 points to, again, it goes back to the question, what can I do with 400 points? It could be Callis Toll and friends. It could be so many things in our army. Is it worth it? And I think the question now that they've gone up, essentially double command corp list has gone up 60 points, let alone if you've had anything else go up in points. 60 points, those armies were on the nose as it was. That could be dropping a unit. That could be there could be a lot of impacts, right? So
I've found that it's been losing a hero, and when you lose a hero in this army, it's devastating. Your hero is your allegiance ability, right? And I've found that like as soon as I lost that hero, the army kind of ceased to function, or I didn't have a screen. And then if you think about the steam tank list with command core, list went up like 200 points. And you take out a whole steam tank, it matters, right?
yeah.
Or if you think about also, like if you're running, 2 command core and the Pontifex, and that's was it 580 points to your army that's dedicated towards keeping X amount of units alive, and when those units inevitably die, because they will die, the game's over. Right?
Yeah, that's almost 600 points. If you do double command corp and the Pontifex, that is 580. Or if you're doing double command corp and a Hurricanum, again, same thing, right? So I guess to kind of summarize this, Kyle, and I want to get to the allegiance rules, and we might not rapidly go through it, but I think this book is so deep that we could spend 10 years doing this video and probably still only scratch the surface.
Yeah.
So same kind of conversation I asked you about our formerly our handgunner friends. Command Corp, 200 points. Is it worth it?
Still, yes. Only because a lot of the times, for one unit,
hold on. I'm talking just the Command Corp War Scroll, 200 points. Let me get cool. Command Corp, 200 points.
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
the 200 points. It will secure your grand strat. It'll give you a tactic. It'll stop attritional damage. Those 3 reasons alone are probably like stop you from losing the game, right? The denying of CP will sometimes outright win you the game, especially against OBR. I've found that in the games that I've just denied Supreme Commander, the game is over, right? But you do also have to weigh up to the fact that if you're not taking a full human list, or if you want to have more hammers, or if you find that I personally, I kind of see it as like training wheels, as in like this is a unit that will make up for my mistakes, right? It's great in Hallowheart. It'll stop me from suffering from 3d6 casting all the time. But if I'm a player who doesn't need, I can deal with the attritional damage. I can deal with my opponent's command abilities going off. I'm just going to take another hammer. 180 points is 20 Corsairs. Right? 20 Corsairs can almost pick up any 33 wound unit in the game. Right? That's another hammer, as we'll go to later. It's just, it makes what you can put in a list, especially when you start looking at elves. The command core are kind of a crutch, in my opinion. Still a fantastic unit, but if you can play without it, you'll find that the army is much stronger.
So to rally you back to my original question, Command Corp, 200 points. Yes, it's worth it.
Yes. Sorry, I went around that.
No. This is good. This is good because some people might be thinking about it and they might be interested in these other questions. Am I at a hindrance by not taking it in my list? Because, Banners Held High is definitely a lot easier when you've got a Command Corp, let alone some of the other benefits you talked about. So basically, is it an auto-include?
Auto-include, no. As in, I've found success not taking it in a lot of games. Is it really scary when you're not taking it? At first, yes. If you were playing with Command Core and you're like, oh my God, I'm not going to be okay. I don't have my command core, right? And it looks scary. And then you realize that you have just so much more in your army. You can take a hit because you have more of an army, That's what I've found. And I think it's kind of been eye-opening not taking Command Core in cities.
Which then leads into and by the way, like Kyle and I have been list building, and the list that I'm taking tomorrow has no command corp. So it's like I'm going to test this theory into practice, because I'm like, well, it's either an extra steam tank, or it's going to be command corp, or it's extra Wilder Corp hunters. But the last point, and then I want to get into allegiance rules, is we talked earlier about a lot of the most successful lists of late before these rules changes have been double command corp. So do you think that a double command corp in cities is still viable? Is it something you still want to do, or is it a situational thing depending on what you're building around? Like, give me more about the double command corp.
I mean, it's the list that we looked at earlier with Callis and Toll had double command core. It's still good. It still will. I mean, the same sense that if you're taking Catacross and Arcan and OBR. Sorry, I keep referencing OBR because OBR is like the army.
No. It's a good reference, right? Because you think of the likes of Gitz, Lumineth, and OBR have a lot in common with cities, and the command allocation is definitely something that we share in common with OBR.
Mm-hmm. But so the important thing is balancing how many wounds you're going to return, how well you can brawl with attritional damage is like based on your command core, how many command core you have, right? At 2d3 on 3 units, if you can spread out the amount of damage where you're taking it, then, and you can maximize how much healing you're getting out of it, you can win games just by brawling with your opponents, right? You have to build very specific lists for this. You have to take nothing but humans as a result, but the unit still has a place. Even at 210, I would still probably take 2 in some lists. It's not an auto include, but it's also not viable. Yeah.
Cool. So there's a middle ground. It depends on.
I think it's in a good spot, honestly.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the what it used to offer at this price is definitely a little cheap, but I think to your point, it's definitely something that depends on your build and your archetype. For example, I keep going back to Cavaliers because that's the one that I love, and I've also got 20 of them literally sitting right next to me. That's not in my current list for tomorrow, but boy, oh boy, do I just want to let the horses free. That's really hard to kind of be chasing up the horses, especially in like a Misthaven or Excelsius where I want to be charging. So the value of them definitely isn't as great. But if I am doing something like lots of Steel Helms, lots of Wilder Corp, lots of, Fusiliers, if I'm doing a lot of chaff, then, or as you mentioned, Hallowheart and taking the damage and recursion, there's definitely value. So it's very, I guess, situational here.
And I should say the last thing with Wilder Core is that because of the timing on the healing, the way that Misthaven works is the end of the hero phase, you heal, or you can move with Command Core and then heal something. So that's actually most where I've found that Misthaven Command Core have been really useful with horses, is that you can move in range and then heal something. Yes. So that has been really good. But as of me attempting to get this to work with horses so many times, although it's really funny to countercharge Finest Hour +4 to charge and then do the thing, I would never take more than one. And even then, that's kind of like I'm struggling to take even one command core if I'm taking a horses list. It's too many points for something that's
I would much rather 5 extra horses than a second command corp in that particular build. But all right, let's get into the rules. Let's get into and give us a bit of an overview and let's at least have a discussion around where cities is at. I don't think I've actually done a cities video since we initially launched. So it's probably been a good 3 or so months. People have finally got their armies on the table. They've had to play with it. People talked about, I'll be honest with you, I didn't give Hallowheart enough credit when I talked about it. I think when I looked at the Magic faction, I'm like, I much prefer Settler's Gain than Hallowheart. And boy, oh boy, was I wrong there. So I think there's some assumptions that have proved us wrong, some assumptions that have definitely proved us right. But also, there's been a whole bunch of things that have happened since then. We've had Belthanos, for example, who's come in, and that might give you a bit of love for our living city friends. But more importantly, and I'll never forget what I said when it came to Lethis, I said I love the idea of Lethis, but we do not have a good priest that we can maximize the ability. And the gods, James Workshop, heard me, and he said, Coach, let you have a Stormcast Dragon priest that you can enjoy and put into your Lethis army. And boy, oh boy, does that change the Lethis conversation. So a lot's changed. A lot has changed, which is where I want to talk here today. But to give me an overview, not necessarily about the rules, Kyle, because I think we've all read this at least by now. But I want to know, how do you think about the orders, not the actual orders themselves, because they'll be on the next page, but as a concept, are you thinking about one hero for every troop? Are you thinking about, you've mentioned a few times now about units that can receive multiple types of orders because in the value that utility brings, the Wilder Corp Hunters, the steam tanks as examples. How do you think about this as like a list archetype build structure thingy mabobus?
Okay, so the first thing about orders that I want to make sure that people realize is that every army in the game has allegiance abilities that are basically passive allegiance abilities. You get this for taking the army, right? Like if you're playing Darzakane, you have this table of things you go down just from existing. If you're playing Nighthaunt, you have the ability to retreat and charge. You have Ethereal. If you're playing Slaves, you have Marks of Chaos. And all of these things you get just from playing the army. In Cities of Sigmar, you do not get anything from playing the army, just playing the army. You get orders, which are active abilities that the amount that you get is determined completely by how many heroes you have, right? So if you're taking 3 heroes and you're playing a battle regiment, you're gonna feel your lack of allegiance abilities. As in, like when you lose all your heroes and you're sitting there going, "Wow, my units don't actually do anything because nothing is written on. They don't have like that's why dwarves are so bad. It's because their orders suck. It makes all of the difference. All of the difference, and that's kind of why humans are so good. I don't really care for suppressing fire, but return fire is such an amazing order that you have to respect what it does in the army, right? So knowing that. I tend to like have a number of heroes based on how many orders I think I'm going to need given what I'm trying to achieve with the list that I'm building. This is something that you kind of get to figure out once you've run a few lists and realize you didn't have enough orders, or if you've run lists and had too many. Because when I first started with the new book, the first thing I did was run Hammerhall Aksha with 6 heroes and Talia. So I had 8 orders. And I was just like grinding myself, figuring out which orders I actually needed and which ones I didn't. And then from there, I went down to playing elves with, or well, I was playing elves and steam tanks. And I had 3 Black Arc Fleet Masters. And it's like, okay, well, how many of the elf orders do I need to do the things I want to do? How many human orders do I need? And then like what I came to is that usually you want 3 of at least 3 of if you're going in a mixed cities list, right? You're going to want 3 elf heroes and you're going to want 3 human heroes. But you can sometimes splash 1 elf hero in just for the fight first. But yeah, the orders, I find that any list that I have less than 5 characters, I'm struggling a lot with not being able to do the stuff I need to do. And when you start losing heroes in the middle of the game, that's when you're just like, oh man, this is getting really rough. And that's why the list that I took to LVO, when the points went up and I went from 5 heroes to 4, I was like, this is unplayable. Like I literally can't do the stuff that I need to do anymore because the heroes are so important. Not unplayable, but like really close, right?
No, and I think that's really where cities players need to think about heroes as a force multiplier. And then I guess the challenge as well is you're thinking about some of the support pieces as well that might not be heroes. And this is where that extra layer of complexity comes into play. And you really got to think about the role of the unit and what you're trying to do with them and where you get the biggest bang for buck and what you need in order to, like, for example, I keep going to like my Misthaven Excelsius list. I love knights. Who knew I play destruction? I like to charge, right? But, for me, I think about the counter charge and I think about, right, well, if I'm going to take Cavaliers, do I take a block of 10 with a marshal? Do I take 2 blocks of 10 and take 2 marshals, or do I take a block of 10 and a couple of 5s with 1 marshal? So all of a sudden I've got to think about, well, if I only take 1 marshal, but the counter charge as an example or advanced information is really valuable to me, how am I issuing these orders? Or if I get sniped out because the opponent has, some really good power to reach out and touch that marshal on Horsey, then half of my strategy or part of my strategy disappears. So there's a value in redundancy, but then there's also a real value of having the right characters, as you mentioned, having enough, but also not over investing, and you've got a bunch of wasted things that could have been resources into other areas, and you are running very tight lists.
Yeah. So let's use the Cav as an example. I would never, if in a what do you call it, a list with Cav, and where Cav is the main focus, I would always take 2 Cav marshals. The reason for this is because you need 1 to advance in formation, and you need 1 to engage the foe. And then once 1 is in, so you're going to find a star with the first one, and then you're going to get you guys in. And then when it goes to their turn, you're going to find a star with the second one and retreat. And countercharge, right? Like it's like when you don't have that redundancy, the hammer doesn't work, because they're gonna hit you now, and you're just gonna roll over and die because you're 20 wounds on a 3-up save for 380 points or whatever, 360 points. Like Chaos Warriors are 180 points for the same defensive profile, right? Like, and that's a really good defensive profile, but it's just going to keel over and die, right? But the difference of having that hero, so like if you think that having that banner in Chaos Warriors that gives you the reduced rend and then the -1 to be wounded, if that's their allegiance ability, having a second hero that has the counter charge to give you the fight first is your allegiance ability. If you do not have that hero, you don't have an allegiance ability in your opponent's turn, right? The amount of, where you're putting your orders, and the coolest thing, I guess, about playing this army is that you get to decide what your allegiance abilities are based on this list of what we're looking at here. Like, oh, you know what? I really, really like countercharge. I'm going to have the heroes I need to have in the places I need to have them in order to countercharge, right? Think of advanced information. Think of Talia, the dependents in Misthaven. Let's say that I hate 2d6 in Misthaven because sometimes I roll a 3. Well, it doesn't matter because I put Galen a little bit further up, and then the horses went 3 inches, and now they're in range of advanced information off of Galen. I took engage to the foe on my Cav Marshal because I didn't know, I wasn't for certain how far I was going to move. Well, now it's okay that I didn't roll like a high number in my Misthaven move because I had a backup plan, which is the advanced information. So now I'm going to go. And so like you need to set up like these chains of like where I'm going to go, where I'm going to be, where these units are probably going to be standing at the end of not only my turn, but my opponent's turn and my next turn, in order to make sure that I'm set up to actually give myself an allegiance ability. Right. So, yeah, it's a really, you fail a lot because the 3 inches is brutal.
Yeah, you need to, it's very deliberate, right? Like there's a lot of factions where you have a, be within 12 inches or 18 inches, and there's a lot of fail safes in a lot of factions. This is where having deliberate actions, having a sequence of events. And this is why I'm asking you the question, is I want to get under the hood to go, right, well, how does Kyle think about the orders, given it is essentially our allegiance ability? But then also, how do I start to sequence it? Like, right, well, whether it's turn one, I always want to be able to do advanced formation. That's the number one, except if I happen to face a army that is like, let's say, Iron Jaws or something's going to rush forward in front of me, maybe I want to be making sure I've got like a counter charge set up, or I'm against long strikes or some type of shooting army. I want to be able to return fire. So you've got in my ideal world, this is the type of things that I want to do, both battle tactics and orders. And then should there be different scenarios, then you might deviate slightly. And we have this, right? Magical dominance is the battle tactic we want to do first, except sometimes you go up against, a really hard army. So maybe it's intimidate the invaders. But what if I play a battle plan that there's no neutral territory? Then then my fail safe might be surround and destroy. Again, this is where you've got to really sit back and before you hit the gaming table, think about what's my ideal preference and what am I building around. And then if things aren't going my way because of my faction or my battle tactics, then what's my alternative routes?
So the best way I find to use the orders is to decide at the list building stage. The reason, like, I'm going to use the Smash Griffin, for example, because it's very obvious which orders you're going to use. He's going to always have countercharge on him, except for when he needs to engage the foe. And he only needs to engage the foe the one turn you're going to pop the, I'm going to do 2 orders this turn. I'm going to engage the foe and advance and countercharge, right? You have certain units that will always take the same orders, which makes it very easy. You'll have certain units that will be in positions to always do advanced information. And then you're going to have extra orders that you're going to need to think about. Not necessarily, you never know exactly where your opponent's going to be, right? Sometimes I just take countercharge and my opponent will be like, why did you take countercharge? Because I'll do it to them. They're like, why did you think I was going to be here? And I'm like, I didn't. But just in case, I knew if you were going to be in a place where I didn't expect you to be, that means that I have you were going for some play that probably you shouldn't have been doing, but might win you the game. But since I countercharge you just now, I win. Right? Like I was playing against Cruel Boys the other day. They were playing Grinning Blades. I can't see them, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I had to take first. I moved up, and then I put countercharge on my Wilder Core, and this was on what do you call it? Ice fields, when we can't run too much. And so he put his units. So actually, wait, no, sorry, I went second. This is why I won. So I was playing Misthaven. He took. We did the thing where he forward deployed some screen in order to stop me from being able to do my Misthaven move. And then he moved some models forward to tag my objective that I wasn't really standing on. And then I countercharged and I rolled an 11-inch charge and then I won the game. And it was just like, why did you have countercharge there? And I was like, well, if I stop you from scoring my objective and I take your objective and I remove the screen in front of me, then it goes to my turn and I just made all this extra distance. I couldn't shoot you from as far as where I was, but I was hoping that maybe I'd be able to charge anything to get myself the extra movement to then shoot you on my turn. And then I just picked up all his bulk boys, right? So it was just like, I always take at least one counter charge. And then when I say always, every time I don't take at least one counter charge, I'm like, oh no, why did I take 3 suppressing fires? I knew he wasn't going to shoot me. Even against KO, right? I played against KO and twice now, they never shot me one time. And I was just sitting there with 3 orders that weren't doing anything. So not only, on one hand, it's like, oh, good, I stopped him from shooting me. And then I went, wait, I don't have an allegiance ability because my orders aren't doing anything, right? Like if I had taken a counter charge when the Ironclad charged one of my units, and if I countercharged the steam tank into the Ironclad, I would have won the game, right? Like, it's like those. I always have one. Try to always have one counter charge because it will matter somewhere. Some unit is going to get it right. Return fire, I think, is a bit of a trap for both you and your opponent. I usually take 2 or 3 of them turn 1 only until it happens to them one time. And then after that, I only take 1 because they might shoot me, but they probably won't. But because they might, I still need to like plan for it. This is why the 5 heroes is kind of important, because you always need advanced information. You always need countercharge. And then there's probably 2 countercharges that you want, right? And then suppressing fire as an option for a tactic, because sometimes you're not going to have any other tactics besides the really terrible bombardment one or whatever. So having 1 suppressing fire is sometimes important. And then going over to the elf ones, these are auto includes. If you actually play elves, you need to have 4 of these. You need to have 2 strike them downs, and usually I'm going to have 2 counter charges if it's my turn first. But swift disengage literally wins games, because if your opponent is doing lead in the maelstrom, sometimes I've won games from like the I will be going first. I will put swift disengage down because I'm not going to be charging this turn, and he probably has to take a tactic where he has to be in combat with me. I'm like, okay, well then you're going to charge me, and I'm like, okay, cool. And in combat, I'm going to leave, and not only am I going to leave, I'm going to go onto your objective. So I've done this before where I've literally had my opponent score 0 because I had my Dreadlord on Dragon get charged. He killed all the Cold One Knights, and then I just like, okay, I'm going to disengage 14 inches, take your back objective, and you don't control more than me, you don't control 1 or 2, and you fail your tactic. And I'm like, okay, it didn't matter that I didn't kill a single unit in his army. You lost the game because you just weren't standing in the right place. Right, the orders make all of the difference.
It's very much about thinking very far ahead. Like, you can't be someone who's just reactionary. You're really got to be thinking about what my unit is really good at. And you mentioned earlier, high movement. Like Scourge Runner Chariot's another good example that might benefit from things like there's so many cool things you can do with it. It just depends on what you're trying to do, what your army's good at, what you want to do. And yeah, like there's I think again we could do a whole show just on orders and who receives them well and at what times do you issue them. But the lesson here is like there's a lot of learning, like there's a lot of trial and error, and it's a fun little rule.
It is. I will give the Duardin players a quick form shield wall is okay sometimes. Grim Last Stand
it's their
is the
best
worst order I've ever seen. I mean, there's only a few of these orders, but this is so bad that I cannot look at that.
Form shield wall is their best, and I think that just represents the fact that you really don't see a lot of Duardin in cities. Like, unfortunately, they are probably paying the penalty for when you had Soul Screaming Bridge teleporting those Iron Drakes up the board with Render Million, blasting everyone away, and then you teleport them again, and like that they are paying for the sins of the past, because the Duardin, at best, I might take like a gyrocopter or 2, some nice little like moving around shenanigans, but I personally would not build a Duardin force or even a Duardin focused force. But I do wonder, when they revisit cities again, if they then explore the elves or the dwarves and kind of bring them up, because the power discrepancy between humans and not humans, it's clear, it's evident. There's more units, there's more options, there's more abilities, there's more orders. There's a lot of new things. You know what? I might skip through some of these enhancements, mostly because we've got them. Actually, let's just rapid fire this. Rapid fire.
Okay.
Like, let's imagine we're in an elevator, building a human-focused general. What's the command trait? What's the thing that stand out for you from humans?
Okay, I'll try to go as fast. Divine Commander.
No, you don't have to go fast, but like, let's not spend.
If you're not taking Smash Griffin as your general, Divine Champion is pretty much always what I take. always. It's just the +1 to wound aura in a human focus list is going to make such a big difference when it goes off, or if you're unbinding, dispelling the invocations. Literally wins you games. Grizzled Veteran on the Smash Griffin is basically paramount if you're not running a Steam Tank Commander. The reason for that is what that guy is doing is with Grizzled Veteran, he will almost always win against monsters. Like I have sent him against Mega Gargants and won duels, right? But it really depends on what else is in your list. Like the reason why I say you don't need it with the Steam Tank Commander is because the Steam Tank, by nature of being such a hard unit to kill, is already taking the focus of your opponent's hardest hitting stuff. So then the Griffin becomes a 270 point unit of kill anything in the game on the flank, completely unsupported, doing its own thing, right? That's why I don't think Grizzled Veteran is a necessarily auto-include, but it's also still very good. Master's Ballistics, terrible, unless you're running 30 boys. And
yeah, it's lost value. It's lost value in some of the changes that we've seen so far. What are the artifacts? Like, what are your top 2 artifacts?
Magnoscope, or the Magnificent Macroscope, whatever it's called. Almost an auto-include if you're taking Wilder Core. The Warhammer is an auto-include if you're taking the Smash Griffin. And then I'll say real quick, though, just Glimmering is pretty good on a Steam Tank Commander. That's the only time, but that's it.
If I only had one artifact and my army had both the Wilder Corp and the Smash Griffin, which is the number 1?
If you only have one artifact, and you're not picking
one artifact. No, like if I'm trying to get your number 1. What is your number 1?
It's so hard to say. It would probably be the Magnoscope. Macroscope, just because of how much of a difference the 3 inches make for the units that benefit from it.
Yeah, like you look at the base profile of the Wilder Corp and they're based 18, so all of a sudden you've got a 24-inch. Add the fact that they've got the pre-game move as well, which then is what's that? That adds you another 5. So if you are a high drop army, which you probably are going to be, it does give you a very good first turn potential threat. So I dig it.
The other thing, if you think about casting the spell that makes it so your opponent has -2 to charge, and you have +3 inches of range, and you have this 5-inch extra gap because of like what you chose to do with your list, you're just shooting them from 21 inches away. It'll make all the difference, right? So yeah,
dig it. I like it. All right, same one. Probably a little bit faster here. Do you have a favorite command trait? This one's a really hard one. I think maybe of Mighty Lineage is probably maybe the one that I'm not. It's hard for me to justify a Duardin General at the moment.
I actually think the Warden King is a fantastic war scroll, and the command traits are great. The Mighty Liege, if you countercharge, and then you also countercharge Hammerers, like you say you countercharge into a hero, and you also countercharge Hammerers, you fight first and just kill whatever, right? Fantastic. Except enemy hero is the problem, because if your opponent doesn't put heroes in the front line, you don't have a command trait. Insurmountable Resilience is probably more consistent. And then Master of Ancient Lore, you're taking Rune Priest. It's not even.
Just doubling down on priests and then the artifacts. What Pile Driver, Book of Grudges, even actually all 3 of them are fairly decent.
Fine. They're fine. Heavy Metal Ingot is actually kind of amazing if you have the 4 board on your guy. You just put him there and you have some hammers nearby. Pretty good.
You just can't move. You just can't move.
Which is not bad considering. I mean, if you just have him by himself, right, and you just give himself Shield Wall, and he's just sitting there with his can't be rendered 5-up ward for 110 points, is actually not terrible.
Yeah, but it's not bad. But more importantly, the Pile Driver Gauntlet, I don't care. Pile Driver Gauntlet for me is number 1. Mostly because it's a pro wrestling reference.
And ignore the rules.
Fight laughs, war up. Yeah,
England.
yeah. And then as the elf man, and it's interesting because actually when the book dropped, I'll never forget this. The elf players felt really disappointed. They thought they got the shortest stick, and I know you're really high on them, and I've seen some really good lists come out of you. Where do you stand on the elf side?
Depends. Elves can be built 3 or 4 different ways, and which command trait you pick will be evident based on the rest of your army. Like whoever your general is, it'll be one command trait, so you'll know. If you have the Dreadlord, it's going to be Unparalleled Duelist. If you have the Corsair, the Blackheart Fleetmaster, it's going to be Unparalleled Duelist. If you have a Sorceress, it's going to be Secretive Warlock. Like that's an auto pick.
Yeah.
The Anklet is also not a pick. I actually think, well, Unparalleled Duelist by itself is probably one of the best command traits in the game. It just goes on one of the worst units. Like, it's pretty funny. So yeah, the command traits are pretty straightforward, and I think the artifacts, like 2 of them, are absolutely god awful. Anklet is kind of an auto include if you're, and I just I'm taking wizards, I'm just taking more spells. Basically, that's kind of all I have to say about that. But the units themselves, like the way that you actually play elves, is how in Daughters of Cain right now they're known as scoring 5 tactics and getting their grand strat, right? Elves, to me, score 5 tactics and get their grand strat better than Daughters do because they also have the advantage of sometimes actually killing your opponent. Like, but it just the orders make all of the difference. Like the cool thing about Sisters of Slaughter in Daughters of Cain is that you can put your screen and you can do your 25 mil 6-inch pylon and hit your opponent, right? But if you're doing this with like Executioners or Blackheart Corsairs with Tenebrous Blades and Hoarfrost, and you're just charging through your Blackguard screen, countercharge, fight first, pick up anything in the game, goes to your turn, pick up the next thing, goes to their turn, you redeploy it backwards through your screen again and do it again. Like it's or you just spend the whole game just like scoring points with your Hydras because Hydras will always win against equivalent points value things. It's a weird army that you don't really I've found every time I thought to myself, I want to kill my opponent, I lose the game. But if I just go, what if I just score points? If the Hydra lives by round 3, I win the game. It's a really weird, really weird army. And it's been an absolute joy to play. I've done like 18 games with it, and it's been wild.
It's so funny you talk about the Hydra because it's something that I've been really a big fan of, and it's one that like I always add it, but then I always drop it from my list. I'm like, oh, but I should persist with it because it does have it's an interesting distraction kind of effects. Like it's got a decent profile, it has some interesting rules. The fact that it heals up is great. It's a tar pit. It'll just annoy the absolute hell out of your opponent, and it's kind of like the Hell Pit is it Hell Pit? The Skaven Hell Pit? The
Yeah.
like it's just annoying. Like it's good. It's not overpowered. It's just annoying, and it pins you down, and it grinds you, and you regretted being in combat with it to begin with, while the rest of your army does its thing.
Exactly. I will say that the difference between the Hydra and the Charybdis is the Charybdis is actually the distraction card effects. The Hydra is the unit that your opponent looks at and goes, like they look at the war scroll and go, oh, that's not going to do anything. And then you play the game and then it wins the game because you put your Hydra where the opponent puts their 100, 200, 300 point flanking unit. Like I have won duels against, like 20 ghouls or against 5 Death Riders or, just whatever the opponent puts on that one objective. Like I find that games are decided by whoever wins that third objective, right? And the Hydra will almost always win that third objective because if your opponent puts enough points to kill the Hydra, they have lost the game in the center. Against anything that's not Trog, like the trolls will kill a Hydra, but like most of the other games, I've just been like that Hydra has just killed Marathi, right? Like just kind of gnarly.
You're right also on the Charybdis, right? Like you look at the Charybdis and shutting down Rally and Inspiring Presence within 12 inches. So like for example, if I had was like the Fusiliers, right? I would have one or two of these idiots running around, because as I'm chipping away, this thing's within 12 inches. I'm making you run away, and hopefully I steal the triumph from you. So like, this is great. Like 160 points. It's
phenomenal. Actually, so
yeah.
if you go to the next screen with the
Sorry, who's running this? Is
oh
it
no.
you or me?
Oh, but no, sorry, we're actually not even there. But
No, keep going. Keep going.
the
Like
Cryptus, I will say, just the Cryptus. The reason why it's in Scourge Runner Privateers or whatever it's called. The Black Arc subfaction within the subfaction is because the Scourge Runner chariots have so many dinky attacks at like 4s and 4s, right? And you're like, oh, it's not actually going to kill anything. But then you look at the sorcerer's spell that says roll 2d6 on your bravery check, and then you have the Cryptus, the Umbral Hex here, right? If you have a Cryptus and you have Umbral Hex and you have like 6 or 9 Scourge Runner chariots, you don't even need to kill your opponent. You just need to kill like 2 or 3 models, and the whole unit's running away. Right? Like that's devastating. And this is actually like the army that, like there in second edition, there were some like bravery -9 armies, but in third edition, battle shocking your opponent hasn't really been a thing. That where they're gone, right? But I've found that if you really lean into it with shooting, gray water with Charybdis in Scourge Runners, you can actually table your opponent without needing to actually do the damage to table them, and it can be devastating.
And also, this also might be where that War Hulk is running around behind or supporting, let's say, the Charybdis, just doing enough chipping away, and then you're running away. You're within 12. He gets into combat. You just there's some nice little layers of synergy that starts to appear, even though they're human and elf, very, very different.
Yes.
Quick, what's your favorite spells right now? Now, unfortunately, obviously, people who are running Warforges have to take the transmutation of lead. But if you've got a battle mage, for example, what is the spell that you want?
Depends on if you have a Smash Griffin or not. If you have a Smash Griffin, Wild Form is auto-include. If you can't even take a Smash Griffin without a battle mage with Wild Form, in my opinion, because the 3d6 countercharge is such a I finest hour my Smash Griffin, put him on the farthest board edge, and then my opponent goes, it's not worth it. I have to charge off of the objective to try and kill this guy, and he has finest hour. I'm not going to do it. Like, okay, cool. End of your charge phase, I'm the counter charge. 3d6, take an objective from you, deny a tactic, and then kill a thing. Now it's my turn. I'm going to charge again, right? Like, Wild Form is the best spell in an army that can countercharge. When I first read this, I can't believe they actually added this is the best army in the game. And then I haven't seen it too much. It's hard to pull off, to be fair. But
Wild Form?
No, the countercharge.
Oh, the countercharge. Sorry, I'm
yes,
I can't
no. Wild Form is not hard to cast.
I'm like, why can't I pull off Wild Form? Like, yeah,
but I just haven't seen it in too many lists, which is, it's more has to do with the fact that before this, you were always taking 2 Warforgers, and taking that Battle Mage was a little difficult. But then I also want to talk about Pal of Doom and Mystifying Miasma with the plus 6 inches to range on the Battle Mage. But you can literally build your list around these 2 spells. Like, if you're playing a castle shooting cities list with 30 Fusiliers, you have to take Mystifying Miasma with plus 6 inches, because you're never going to do enough damage to kill them in 1 turn. Maybe in 2 turns, but at 3 turns, you're going to kill them, right? Like, if I'm going to pick the most important unit at the back of the field and just say that unit can't run, then I get to choose how long I'm going to be engaging in my little castle thing here, and then I can just kind of weather the storm a lot easier, right? Pal of Doom, meanwhile, will automatically win you the game against Catacross. It's over. Catacross, or what's his face, Nurgle dude kind of charges.
Glocken.
Yeah. When those 2 models cannot issue commands, it's devastating. But also, just stopping opponents from inspiring presence when you don't have a Charybdis. When you're playing all humans, you're just shooting a bunch of small units. It makes a big difference.
Can I went, as always, I went to best case or worst case scenario, and I just thought about mystifying my asthma with a Gotrek on the table. They're like, oh, you can't run. I just neutralized this whole 500-point idiot from getting involved.
It's over.
There's so, and even like when you combine the fact that they can't run and the -2 to charge, then you throw down a redeploy. That can be devastating, absolutely devastating. And I just want to give a shout out to my homeboy of Fears of Protection. Give me that ethereal steam tank, and that's where I'm at. But no,
If you could take it on a battle mage on Hyrcanum, it would be the best spell in that army, but you can't. So it's
you need to take it on the Luminarch would take it, but not the Hurricanum.
Oh, can the Luminarch take it?
Should, because Luminarch's from light, shouldn't it? So surely. I mean,
sure
I'm making. I mean, the Luminarch is from the Battle Mage of Light, so I assume if anyone can take it, it's that. Don't you sense check me on my own show?
Oh no, I'd be surprised. I mean, because then the Luminarch might be useful, right? Like,
because it's locked, right? Like yeah, it is wizard.
You're right.
If you pick a spell from. Yeah, go me. I'm always right. Yeah, so it has to be for Feast Protection because it's from the light realm. So, yeah.
Actually, really good on the Steam Tank list. You get your 6 on board automatically.
Correct.
Okay, I'll send you that list there.
There you go. See, Coach adds value even to Team America's list whisperer. Yep. But anyway, like there's some good spells I think we like. I think the key though is that, at the moment the challenge is the Battle Mage is competing with the Warforger, and like a lot of people are taking double Warforger right now. It's still a really good ability, and unfortunately you just don't run that many Battle Mages. And when you do, you then start asking the question, do I put it on a Hurricanum and or a Luminarch, or even on a Griffin? I actually don't hate the Battle Mage on Griffin. It is a little bit restricted, but I still think it's not a bad little option. It can. It just doesn't play right now to the current Generals Handbook. You talked a little bit about the wizard spells. Anything you want to call out with the priests? Again, like I've never found myself forcing a Duardin priest in my list. Obviously, if I'm running a Duardin focused faction, different story. But for me, in my human focus, none of this is enough for me to go, I need to add a dwarf priest. I used to, when I used to get +2 to unbinding and getting rid of like invocations, but now that's gone. I don't need you. I'm sorry.
Yep. The this particular discussion comes to like, do you want a sorceress and 20 blackguard, or do you want a rune priest and 20 iron breakers? Right, they're almost equivalent points costs. The difference you get is a 3-up save and a 4-up ward that can have -1 to wound. The 4-up ward is situational, or you get a 4-up save and a 4-up ward, and probably Blizzard. And so the problem kind of really is that like the sorceress and the blackguard, even saying that you're taking this in a human list, like what are you splashing in, right? The sorceress and the blackguard in the current GHB will always win out, in my opinion. However, -1 to wound iron breakers as a screen is not bad. It's technically a better save. Like it has a better base save than the Steelhelm screen might have. You can still cover it with return fire from fusils that might be behind iron breakers, and then you have like it's the unit will stay there. If you're not taking command core, technically iron breakers will kind of stick around longer than the Steelhelms will. So that's the only time, like the -1 to wound, doing the prayer, you have a priest now, and then you could curse. Like it's not horrible.
But how many of those are featuring in your list? Like I know this sounds like good theory, but actually how many times is that combination coming into your army? And I think the answer is going to be no. It's just
nothing. Yeah, I've written a list with it where I said the explicit point was to run all 3 races, and that is the only combo that's viable. But even then, it's not something that I would be a first pick in any of my lists.
No, but when we do talk about first picks, where are the cities that you are leaning into right now? And again, not going into all the rules and talking about, like which are the ones, at least from this particular screen. So right now we're looking at Hammerhall Aksha and Gairan, Hammerhall Gairan, Living City, Greywater, Hallowheart, Tempest Eye, first 6. Which of these ones are you leaning more towards, and why?
So I will have a unit or an idea in my mind first of like, okay, I really want this to work. I think this unit looks cool. And then I'll build a list. And then the subfaction comes afterwards. Does that make sense? Like if you think that the allegiance ability is built around the list because you don't have allegiance ability, then your subfaction is also kind of chosen by your list. So it's like, let's say that I really needed to have 3 heroes. Well, if I only have 3 heroes, I'm running a 1-drop and I'm not in Misthaven, Hammerhall actually is looking really good because getting that extra order is going to matter, right? Or if it's like, oh, I really want to run 6 Scourge Runner Chariots. The only list you can run 6 Scourge Runner Chariots in is Greywater Fastness, right? So this is where it comes to like the subfaction that you're in is going to be decided by the list that you kind of feel like taking. Or if you go the opposite route and go, I really want to play Hammerhall Gyra, whatever. There's only really one list that comes out of wanting to play that subfaction. It's a really good list, but you wouldn't have come to the conclusion from the other direction, right? Like it's, so I should say that the subfaction you play comes from what you as a player kind of feel like this is the army that you want to use, right? None of them are objectively better than others. It's really just depends on what you're doing for your list. Now, I will say though that when I first read the book, Hallowheart, I immediately went, okay, this is like in the current meta, the strongest one. So then I immediately went to Aksha and I played some games in it to see how it felt. And then I went to Greywater to see how it felt. And then I've been playing in Lethis and Lethis and Misthaven for most of my games. And then I went to Hallowheart after losing a whole bunch of games and other subfactions and just went, oh my God, this is like easy mode, right? So, because it's like, you can 3d6 cast Blizzard and throw primals on it. It's insane.
I just didn't want to take the damage, to be honest. Like the reason I was more on the what's it called? Yes, the more I was on Settlers Gain is because I was still getting a passive benefit without the risk of maybe I've just had too many issues from the past where my Hallowheart wizards would just blow up, or especially all those little idiot wizards, not obviously the Hurricanum, but the small battle mages. I didn't want to risk that in some very critical situations, and that was just something that I was uncomfortable with. But definitely bloody good roll. You look at Slaves to Darkness rolling 3d6 on their casting, again, very powerful. But for me, I think there's two faults here, right? I partially agree with you. Partially, there's other sets of rules where I'm like, yeah, look, I love the idea of retreating and shooting. Okay, what are the types of units that best benefit that type of sub-faction? And then start to craft the list. So I think there's 2 approaches that at least I take. Sometimes it's like, I have a list idea what benefits, or I love this concept. What can I build around to make the most of it? Which leads me to the fact that which are the ones that stand out for you? Yes, archetypes, blah, 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 blah. Just tell me your favorites.
So one that I've run the most is Greywater. It's always been the fact that you get the 2 all attacks for free means you can kind of with a marshal, envoy marshal, get all of your all attacks and not spend any CP. And then like when it goes to playing the rest of the game, you have all the CP you need. But I will say, going forward after my LVO list was nerfed and taking 3 steam tanks with fusils is not so much of a good thing anymore, Hallowheart will probably be it. Like, while it does matter that the D3 damage, but it also doesn't, because it will never kill you before you. So the difference between the Slaves of Darkness one is that when you fail that 3d6 cast, you just kill yourself. Your spell doesn't go off, right? This spell will go off, and you will never die the first time that you make this mistake, right? You will take at least 2 turns, probably 3 or 4, And then if you have Command Core, it'll never happen. Right.
And that's the difference. That's the difference. You've got the Command Corp healing. So if you're going to do it, you've got to go all in.
Yes. But I also say that I actually do this with sorceresses the most. Like I've swapped my elf list to being Hallowheart because you have a 4-up ward. So not only are you probably not taking fatal damage, you're also going to be negating half of it. So it really means that if you have a 3d6 cast for the first 3 or 4 turns of the rounds of the game, you've probably cast your spells that matter. So you probably won the game at that point. You know what I mean? Like the spells make the difference for these armies because the spell lore is kind of insane.
The ones that I don't see very often is Living City, at least on this top 6. Let's go. I know Vindicarum has probably dropped in popularity as well, despite it spiking, and people love the idea of Vindicarum. But Living City and Tempest Eye are ones that you don't really see very often, probably because, Tempest Eye used to have the 1 in 4 coalition with character overlords. Living City, 1 in 4 Seraphon, Sylvaneth. Is that the difference and like why you're not seeing them, or is it because other cities are just better, or you don't value the rules? Like why aren't we seeing Living City and Tempest Eyes?
Living City, the reason why it was good was because you moved afterwards. It had nothing to do with Sylvaneth being in it was nice, but like the actual ability you get out of this, coupled with the fact that all of your orders happen in the hero phase, means that this is anti-synergetic with pretty much the way that you expect to be playing the army. So like if you're taking Living City, not only are you taking a suboptimal subfaction, you're also not taking your allegiance ability. So you're just like nerfing yourself in so many different ways, because the only thing you usually can be putting in here is going to be like a Hurricanum, just so you can draw lines, right? It's really painful to put things in the sky. The only things that you kind of put on the board is maybe would be Wildercore, but the fact that they get a pregame move anyway means that you didn't need to. It doesn't do anything, in my opinion. If it still had the move afterwards, or if it still had units like Sisters of the Watch or whatever, that did something when they came out, it'd be useful, but it doesn't. And in Tempest Eye, the reason why we saw Tempest Eye a lot was because it had the best spell lore in the previous Cities book. Like the +1 attack aura, plus +1 to wound command trait was absolutely insane, right?
It was my city. Tempest Eye was my city. And then when I look at the fact that you used to have handgunners and pistoliers are the perfect unit that wants to retreat and shoot. And I don't have that anymore. Like for me, I'm like, I don't want this.
Exactly. So it's the fact that, the units that used to benefit from the most are gone. The spell lore was phenomenal. Like I cannot get over how insane that spell lore was for Tempest Eye and the command traits. Like it's so far away from what it used to be. The only thing I care about now is retreating and charging steam tanks. Every other unit, even the fact that you can take KO and they can retreat, I guess, like that's cool. But I think they come with disengage anyway on the boats. Like it's on the war scroll, like the allegiance ability is that you can disengage in other armies. So I don't know what it's doing at this point.
Maybe chariots, maybe the chariots with their shooting attack, but yeah, I find it hard to justify why I would take Tempest Eye. And then same is true. Mist Haven was quite a popular choice. Same as Excelsius. Settlers Gain really was never a popular subfaction, even in the old book. You don't see it very often, even now. Vindicarum, I think, had a lot of initial excitement, and whether it is the changes to rally, or just that people don't want to build around flagellants and just other units are better. You haven't really seen Vindicarum take off, and then Lethus, you're starting to slowly see excitement. And again, there's some things that have happened since then, but thoughts here?
I think Ionis is great in Lethus. If you start the list with Lethus and Ionis is in it, build a list around it, you can have a lot of fun. That's more of a meta pick though. Like if you look at your local meta and say, "Oh my god, I hate Fire Slayers or Nurgle," and then you're taking Lethus, right? Like this is what you've decided to do. Settlers Gain, if you really want to make work, or if you just really like Lumineth and you have the twins, I honestly think is not a bad subfaction. And I've written some lists that like take advantage of it. Like if you really wanted a sorceress on Black Dragon to work, Settlers Gain is actually really good for her. But like you said, it's not going to be a first pick just because you're kind of going out of your way to make this work. Vindicarum is kind of the same way. If dwarves were better, then Vindicarum would be really good. But they're not. So like if they had a 4-up rally as a character, Vindicarum would be like the dwarf faction, right? Or if Flagellants were 50 points, or they came in units of 20 for 100, right? Like zombies.
That's the difference, right? Like, because as soon as I saw that, I'm like, man, it's like zombies, but it's not, because they're coming up in units of 10, not units of 20, which means I can only go maximum 60, not maximum. So I can only go 30, not 60. And that's a big difference when you are building into Vindicarum, that you can't play the zombie build. You just can't.
Mm-hmm. And then Misthaven is probably like the best subfaction in the sense that movement wins the game. So if you're a player who understands that, like kind of like Jeremy did, or does, if you understand how movement wins the game, you will win the game with Misthaven. I've lost a lot of games with Misthaven, so I can confidently say that I don't understand that. But and then Excelsius, I haven't run this one personally, but it's fun. Like I understand why people have been running it. And like, okay, I want to take Cav. I really want to take Hydras are amazing in this hilariously. And then taking the Battle Mage on the Griffin in Excelsius,
Excelsius, yeah.
Excelsius is really good. But of these here, I really only say that Lethis and Misthaven would be ones that I would personally take in regards to like these are the two that I think are. Lethis again is specifically based on your meta. It's insanely good if your meta is like very ward heavy, but at the same time it does absolutely nothing if you're playing against armies that don't have wards, right?
Yeah.
And then Misthaven, yeah, go ahead.
I think there's some argument as well. I know something like if you were thinking about like Severeth, for example, another Lumineth hero, that independent little hero sniper could be a valuable asset. Yes, the twins I think is a really good pick as well. And if Dawnbringers 7,000,003 does touch Lumineth, then maybe there's something else that comes out of it. But I think Settlers Gain's a little bit of a sleeper. And yeah. I do genuinely like it. It's just at the moment Lumineth is not at their strongest, which is why you're probably not seeing, half the benefit, right?
If you had Coalition in Settlers Gain, then it would be really good, I think. Same thing kind of with Lethis. Like Coalition.
I was going to say that argument probably comes into a few times, right? If I could do Tempest Eye, Coalition, KO, bring in the Smash Ironclad with some Balloon Boys, or bring in something, then Tempest Eye all of a sudden goes up in popularity. All right. And people know I love my Flagellants, so they would just ignore that. I do want to just ask you, and then we'll go into some quick lists, I swear. Castellite formation. When I initially talked about it, all three of my guests breaking down the book, we all poo-pooed it. We're like, too expensive. No, thank you. Points have adjusted. Is now the time to reconsider the Castellite formation. Why? Or why not?
The only benefit you're really getting out of it is unified. And you could just take a battle regiment. Sorry, Slayers, you get Slayers too. But realistically, I don't even think any of these units are bad, right? It's actually the battalion difference. I'm probably going to take Wizard Finders if I have this one hero that's doing something, right? Or I'm probably going to take a battle regiment just normally. I mean, actually, I guess, if you're taking a cannon, then you have to take this, right? Like, but if you're not taking a cannon, then you're probably taking a regular battle regiment, right? Like I don't think it's bad. If this is the units you have, take it, maybe. But even then, still, even if you're taking Fusiliers, like let's just pretend you're taking like 3 units of Fusiliers, right? 2 of them being in Wizard Finders for the spell ignore is probably still more impactful. You know what I mean? Like, I don't mind going higher in drops because Cities always wants to go first, and if they give me second, then I get to double turn you. So
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah, and
it's fun.
if there was a world where I built around steel helms, like I feel like they've got the same issues that like Gut Rippers had when they very first came out. It's like, no, they're too expensive or they don't do enough, and then slowly over time, Gut Rippers have become better and better, cheaper and cheaper, and all of a sudden, you've now got Grin and Blades doing really well over Big Yellows. So. I think, yeah, I think for me, and like we've talked obviously about the Fusiliers as well. So, at the moment, there's just better choices out there.
Yeah.
I think that's the key, right? So Kyle has kindly, if you've hung out for this long and you're probably wondering what is Kyle thinking with his lists, he not only has given me 1 list, but 2 lists, but like 6 lists. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give him a 60-second time limit on each of his lists. You can screenshot them, folks, and, pretend that you claim them and run them yourself at your next RTT. But Kyle's going to give us a quick synopsis of what this is, or like what's critical, because yeah. So first list is a Hallowheart list. Podcast people, you might just need to just come watch the video. There's a War Hulk, there's Warforger, there's Battle Mage. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So what's in this Hallowheart list, or what are you trying to do here?
This is what I imagine what GW had in mind when they wrote the cities list. This is the cities book. They said, we want Fusiliers to stand in a core kind of like castle, and then we're just going to shoot from it, and then the enemy is going to come to us, and we're going to hit them with spells when they get closer. That's the list. This is probably what I would hand to someone if I said, hey, you're just starting the army. You think all the new models look cool. The only one that's here that's not new, I think, is the Battle Mage. Oh, and the Marshal. I mean, but the Marshal is too good not to have him in the list. But and then it's just like, okay, you get to play, basically defend, your city, and this is the list. It looks really cool on the table, and it does exactly kind of what you need to do. I think I have, and I have Mystifying Miasma. So remember how I mentioned earlier that like you cast Mystifying Miasma and you just spend 2 or 3 turns just shooting your opponent to death. And then when they finally get there, then you can countercharge with your Smash Griffin, or you're just kind of castling with your Command Core and your Pontifex. I haven't tried this one yet. I was going to do this one yesterday, but I think it's really, if I'm going to run 30 Fusiliers, this is the list. If you really if you're one of those guys that owns 60 of these things and you're just like, God, how do I get a Fusilier list to work? This is it, in my opinion. So that's
I like it. Yeah, it's very, very, very castly, remnants of the Empire of old. Basically just trying to delete the opponent, or as much of the opponent, before they hit you in the face, because once they do, it's going to hurt. So reduce them at all costs. We also have another Hallowheart list, but this one is definitely more of an elf enthusiast style, where you've got your Dreadlord and Black Dragon, a couple of sorceresses, some Dread Spears, some Drakespawn Knights, which is great, and a whole bunch of other elf friends. So how's this one differ, or what are you trying to do from an elf side?
So this is what I was kind of talking about when I said that the objective isn't to kill your opponent. The objective is to win on points. And since you have the 4 characters, you have the 4 orders. Like typically, I'm casting Horrorfrost on my Drakespawn Knights. I'm casting Tenebrous Blades on them, and then I'm putting them behind my army. And then I'm making my Blackguard into a screen with 25 mil gaps in between, and the Executioners behind that. So if anyone tries to charge me, I can charge around, fight first with the Drakespawn, and I can fight first with the Executioners. So then, knowing this, they go, okay, well, I'm not going to charge you. I'm like, okay, cool. You didn't table me this turn. Now it's my turn. I'm going to walk the Hydra onto the subjective. I'm going to score it, and then I'm going to pass. Okay. And then, go, and then you just play this like, oh, I'm going to charge 3 elves this turn. Oh, I'm going to retreat and charge. Oh, I mean, I can't retreat and charge because I have nothing in combat. Well, it's fine. I have the retreat order. So I'm just going to charge something. And at the end of the combat phase, I'm going to retreat away. Like, it plays the game really, really well. It just doesn't kill the opponent really, really well. Yeah, it's a different philosophy. There's a really interesting thought experiment in trying to get these elves to work.
The Blackguard and the Executioners has sneaky become good now that Phoenix Guard are no longer a thing. It's just you just don't see a lot of them. But when you double down on the Sorceresses, some stabby of the Dread Spears, the Blackguard and I'm a fan of the Executioners and the Blackguard. It's actually a shame that we don't see them as often, and you probably should.
Yeah, it was weird
Well,
playing. I took this army to an RTT, and I was like, "This isn't a real army. None of you have seen this before. These are all models."
no, it blows me away that we are so human focused when there's actually some good elf stuff that isn't really hitting the table. Folks, it's time to bring the elves back on the table. Is this another Hallowheart list? Like another bloody Hallowheart list? We got
this is the last one, I promise.
All right. This one's a bit of a mixed bag, right? You've got elves and humans here.
Yes. This is probably what's going to be my competitive list going forward. Steam tanks, 3 steam tanks is the magic number. You have 3 sources of return fire. I have at least 3 human characters in this list that are going to be standing nearby to the 3 steam tanks that can cover for the Black Arc Corsairs. So, like, let's say that my opponent has a Plague Claw Catapult, or they're playing Bliss Barbs. They cannot shoot me with those units. Normally, like, Black Arc Corsairs are going to die to chip shooting, right? But if my opponent can't shoot my my squishy units without me counterfiring, then it makes a big difference. You're covering your gaps. Like, this is what I imagine again. What the writers were imagining when they said, "Okay, what does mixed cities look like? They should work together." And this list has 7 orders. When I said that you build your list around you build your legibility around your list, the 7 orders is like kind of insane. Like, oh, I'm screening with my Blackguard. My opponent takes Lead in the Maelstrom. I'm gonna retreat, and then it goes to my turn. You're like, okay, you missed your points, and then I'm countercharging with like steam tanks, right? The steam tanks go in and like just get stuck somewhere, or they can go off on their own, and they don't need to worry about like the normal all humans. Like, oh, I'm stuck in a castle. You can actually play 2 different armies, or you can play as one army, and then it just opens up so many different options. I love the ability of the Smash Griffin here is not the general, and he doesn't need the command trait because it basically does what 5 horses do, but cheaper. He's literally cheaper than the 5 horses with the leader, and he does.
I was going to say, like,
with the leader.
Like,
yeah. Like, you're right, but like he does more damage. He does it more consistently, and he flies, and you just cast 3d6 charge him. He goes off to the edge, kills something, goes to the opponent's turn, counter charges. You're going to use engage the foe the first turn, and you counter charge the second turn, or you don't even have to do that. You just tag an objective and you counter charge, right? Like, the counter charge on the Griffin, if he denies a point that your opponent thought was going to be okay, you can win the game just off of that 1 point differential, right? It's just a whole bunch of little things in this list. Like how my problem with running Command Core is, like I said, as soon as you lost one of your arms, the game was over, right? But I was playing a game the other day where the Black Arc Corsairs were the most damaging unit in my army. It's 180 points, as in like they did the most amount of damage throughout the entire game. And the reason they were able to do that is because the steam tanks were basically keeping the rest of the army, distracted. And the Griffin was just kind of killing heroes in the backline, right? It's just, it's a really flexible, really powerful list.
And I think kind of what we're demonstrating here is that there is no one single list. Like, yes, the Gavin, list with steam tanks got a lot of, airtime, and people are like, oh, I'm going to run that. And, Fusiliers as well. People, have seen those types of lists, but we're showing you a lot of very competitive ways, and you're seeing units rotate in and rotate out. Not everyone has the Pontifex. Not every list has a command corp. We're trying here, for example, the Warhulk, where, eating our own dog food. There's lots of different ways. The Scourge Runner Chariots, making an appearance. And obviously the grey water fastness rules coming in, and the 2 potential free all-out attacks, or the 3-1. Like, there's so much flexibility that, again, you could spend a long time building lists in cities. What's the download on this one?
The only thing is Black Arc Fleet Masters add +1 attacks to all profiles when shooting. So when you have 2 of them in Greywater, you do it to both Scourge Runner chariots. You just machine gun. I played against a Ravagers list when the book came out, right? And like I nearly blew up the entire enemy army, bottom of one, because no, he gave me top. I got into a garrison and just like deleted his army. It was gnarly. Like Scourge Runners are insane. But and then you have the problem with Scourge Runners is they can move really fast, but the 18-inch range and their massive bases means that you're kind of like tripping over yourself.
Yeah.
But by having the Fusiliers means that you don't really need to alpha strike with your chariots turn 1. You can keep them in the back and then just kind of pepper your opponent with 30 Fusils until they come close enough for you to counter, like not really counter shoot, but you're just going to go forward and just shoot the opponent. And then also, because it is 30 Fusils, doing the thing where you're going to be counter shooting with the Fusils if your opponent tries to shoot the Scourge Runner chariots is a lot easier because the within 3 inches rule becomes like your whole army is in your deployment zone and you're just going to counter shoot. So you can protect the squishy Scourge Runners with the Fusils.
The interesting thing as well with the Scourge Runners is, yes, I've found a lot of experience where I trip over myself on those massive bases, but at the same time, those massive bases block out a lot of the board. So you can really use it to your advantage of clogging up and denying your opponent. All right, second last list. All right, we're almost there, Kyle. We're almost there. Serves you right for sending me like 100 lists. And by the way, in the 2 weeks leading up to this, I think he dropped like 100 more. So I'm now making him eat his dog food and realize that maybe it's better to stick to a couple of lists rather than just
I can't. It's too much fun. It's too much fun writing these lists.
All right, second last one. This is a Mist Haven list. Definitely bringing in the Great Cannon, Double Command Corp, Smash Griffin still, but you've doubled down here on the Wildercorp Riders, Hunters. Why would I go into like triple? Why am I double reinforcing them to be a unit of 33? That's obviously a lot of points and a big footprint. Is it too much of a good thing? Tell me why I might want to consider this and if I can get my hands on the unit.
Specifically for this list, this is a 1-drop designed to go first. You're going to Wildercorp, pregame move 5, and then just unload on your opponent's screen. At 33, on average, you do, I think it's like 18 wounds to a 5-up save, or it's enough wounds to kill a screen, right? And then with the cannon, it's enough wounds to kill a screen, especially with clan rats. Like this is the magic number I was going for, right? You need to do just enough damage to blow up a screen between the cannon and the Wildercorp in order to get in going first. So this list pops Finest Hour on the Free Guild Marshal, pops and then pops Engage the Foe, and then the Free Guild Griffin will do Engage the Foe, and then you'll 2d6 move all of the mounted units forward, blow up the screen with the shooting units, charge all of the mounted units, fight first with all the mounted units, and you could also still charge and fight first with the Wildercorp. If you give what do you call it? Suppressive fire.
Suppressive fire.
Because you have 3 heroes, right? So you're gonna have 4 orders basically. You don't need advanced information because you're playing Misthaven, and you're just gonna blitz the opponent. The reason why I have 2 command core here is because there was literally nothing for the amount of points given the it wasn't anything else that was going to fit that was going to fulfill the role of doing what this army wanted to do in 1-drop. Now you could, if you didn't want to do 1-drop, this list becomes much different. You take out the command core and you put in more heroes, right? And it becomes a lot more flexible. But if you wanted to play a 1-drop blitz the enemy cities list, this is it, right? Like this, every single unit is doing something. The command core is stopping a redeploy. They're going to be scoring objectives in the back while your rest of your army is like pushing in. and then hopefully you've done enough damage and everything's in the opponent's face that maybe you can just win on points because they can't kill you fast enough.
and you probably pin them in their own territory.
Exactly.
So you've done enough damage to them, which is a lot of fun. And speaking of fun, I'm sure our bearded friends are singing "What About Me." We've got a Misthaven, maybe a Tempest Eye type build for the Duardin, very focused, mostly focused. We do have a special guest appearance by the Lord Ordinator himself from Stormcast, but got a couple of gyros, some long beards, some lion drakes, some rune lords and cogsmiths, and basically everything within the limited range that is the Duardins. What's going through your mind with this particular list?
It almost works. As in, like, this is probably it. Like, I cannot imagine you could run more gyrocopters, right? But this list can brawl. It can get around the fact that, like, old Duardin didn't move very fast. Advanced information is a great order, and encounter charge is still a great order. Like, you can still almost carry the army off of those two alone. The gyrocopters, they're actually a phenomenal unit. I don't know if you've looked at the War Scroll really.
I think they're good. I don't, when I've done them, they haven't been like, they've been like solo operators rather than something that's been reinforced, but I think they're good.
Yeah, they actually have never disappointed me. I ran 3 of them a few times and gone, wow, it's just actually like they damage 2 in melee for some reason. On the counter charge, a run 2 damage 2. So it's kind of like a steam tank with the amount of everything that's going on, except it flies, right? So it's actually a really solid unit. And then with the Lord Ordinator, with Misthaven, where you're kind of like moving forward and then doing mortals, and you can come back and then just kind of like stay in your aura and kind of project power. And when you need to, you can get out. Solid unit. Ironbreakers do what they are supposed to do really well. I've taken 6 Morghast to the face, had 10 out of 30 long Ironbreakers die, and then the Longbeards kept the rest of them from running away because of the 4-up. Like, it actually worked. Everything worked until it came to my turn. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to charge my... now it's time for the hammers to do the thing. They're going to go in. I'm going to buff them up. And then you don't, because it's a 4-up now instead of a 2-up. So you fail the run thing. And then you go through all your prayers, and then you realize, wow, sorceresses are so much better because they have a 3d6 chance of doing this. My 4-up, like, the fact that there's nothing that this army does in your own turn is just, it blows my mind, right? Like, I mean, so the gyrocopters are still good, but when the hammers fail to kill the thing, then you just kind of go, oh.
Which is why I've always felt that Duardin are really good in a blended force where they might be the defensive arm, but you still need the offensive. So it might be a human Duardin or Duardin elf. Because, you know, Duardin elves are normally fragile, so they can't take the hit. So the dwarves take the hit for you.
So
obviously, don't at me about some random example, people. That's just the general archetype.
Then the problem, I was so hoping that all of the stuff that was in the humans that make them tanky was in the Duardin part instead, right? Like, give the shooting can be the humans, the casting can be the humans. Just make the Duardin do what they're supposed to do and just stand there. It would have been such a more beautiful book. The book would be so much more interesting if the Rune Lord had the +1 save aura.
I also would love, you know, while we're wish listing here, I would have loved some things like the Great Cannon and the steam tank, for example, not being keyword locked. Like, why can't a dwarf be in the steam tank? And why can't a dwarf be manning the Great Cannon? And, you know, what does maybe adding the keyword in a subfaction, or if your general is a cogsmith, or if you have a cogsmith in your army, you can keyword 1 Great Cannon or War Machine as a Duardin. Like, if there's that 1-for-1 or one type of, like, what could you possibly do? And I think there is definitely some design space for the elves and the dwarves. The dwarves especially, they're definitely feeling the lack of structure, but the Misthaven adds the movement that they sorely lack, which I like.
Almost
but
almost.
Certainly not my style, but I know there'll be a couple of dwarf people listening to this hoping for some, like, some higher message to help them dust off their troops. But look, run your thing. But you got a lot of tools, and hopefully, who knows? Maybe Dawnbringers will bring a dwarf. I don't know. Grumdy is going to come out and give you some golems or something. I don't know.
I believe it. It's going to happen.
Yeah, come on, Dawnbringers Grumdy with some dwarf stuff. Kyle, this has been awesome. As everyone knows, this video did start off as a Dawnbringers video, so it's definitely about the shadows of the Crone. So we talked about Callis and Toll. We've obviously talked about the Regiment of Renown. We've talked about the Cities of Sigmar as a whole. A lot going on. Great book. Lots of things to talk about. We still have scratched the surface. So if people want to talk more, come chat in Discord. My Discord is brimming full of Cities people talking and list building and bringing crazy ideas to the fold. If you do want to support the channel again, there is the Dawnbringers not only has the book, but there is a box for the Crone and some friends. I haven't seen Callis and Toll and how that's going to be released at this time of recording. If it's in a box set or if it's just a solo like Neve package, I don't know. But if you do want to support the channel, link is down below. Kyle, if people want to talk to you and want to know more, or if people want to follow you on the socials, where can they talk to you?
So I don't really social media too much, unfortunately, but I am in the Coach Discord chat under Kyle C. I've got this angry dwarf Chad looking profile picture, I think. And I'm in a lot of the really high-end competitive chats somewhere, for all Discords. That's pretty much it, though.
And you're obviously saying my Discord as well is one of those
Yes,
those
definitely.
high-end chats.
Definitely.
Look, everyone's talking. Some people less experienced, but just loud voices. Some people clearly know what they're talking about and doing incredibly well. You know who you are, which part of that equation you are. Last question, actually. Let's end it on a little bit of a fun note. If you were going to add something to Cities, if you had the power as James Workshop to do something let's not like manipulate the rules of something. Let's add something to the mix. You're an elf person as well, so I assume it's going to be elfy, but what would you add? What would you add? Huh?
The Cog Fortress. I don't know if you've read the so much of the what do you call it?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, the Cog Fortress. I was so expecting this to be like the thing that came out when the army was. They're gonna have a thing like the Ironclad. It was gonna be awesome, right? Like it was gonna either be a terrain piece that like you could deploy more units from, or it would be just a unit like in place of the steam tank. Like I love the steam tank, right? But if they had a centerpiece model that was like AOS version of a steam tank, that would have been like amazing, right? Like the Cog Fortress sounds so cool in the lore. That would have been the thing. And I am more of a dwarf player than I am an elf player personally. I just really like dark elves because I think Malekith was awesome. It's my second favorite character in fantasy. But more dwarf stuff, or at least playable dwarf stuff, would have been cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I would love to see more war machines. War machines is something. Artillery is a space that hasn't been explored properly, and it kills me. So
Yes.
I'm hoping that we do see more war machines, and maybe the Duardin are the ones that bring a variety of war machines and really bring that grey water fastness to the fold. I just miss people like Helga. Like I miss the Dwarf Queen. Like give me like the anvil. Give me some dwarf love like
yes,
that.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird that we lost artillery actually, like going down.
Yeah.
From like 4
Like the
pieces.
organ gun, the flame cannon. There was all these war machines, and then the only war machine you've got is a human one. It's like this doesn't feel right. Like the sorceress on Black Dragon, they're having a 5-up save. That doesn't feel right. Fix it. It
So
grinds my
wrong.
gears every time I look at it. It annoys me. Please, please, please.
So one
And if you're
cast
not going to do it, give her a 5-up ward. Like just do something. Like the Dreadlord on Black Dragon is so the obvious pick. I don't know why you're allergic to a wizard dragon lady. Like, just do it.
Yep. And not to mention, though, I mean, the shield on the Dreadlord also questionable. Why does this give me a 6-up save? It's really confusing looking at these two Dragon War Scrolls. I think they really wanted to swap them. Just like, okay, guys, we need to make them really bad so people won't buy more of them.
I wouldn't agree. I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't put that past them, to be honest. My Dreadlord on Black Dragon's the old Carmine Dragon, if you remember that model. It's painted black because I think it's a better model than the Dreadlord. I'm sorry, Elves, but I don't like the model.
It's an ugly model. I'm not going to lie.
No, not the best, especially when you look at the new dragons in Stormcast. You're like, man, I just want you. Like I've got you, and then what I got at home, and they're just not the same.
Yep.
Kyle, this has been incredible. I really appreciate your time. I hope people have found value, not only just reviewing Callis and Toll and potentially do you or don't you add you the War Scroll, and obviously revisiting cities, given how much has changed both from experience and play testing, but also just the rules that have evolved and the tournament metas and what's actually happened. And I hope you have enough to think about making the most of this Generals Handbook. And let's wrap this up. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your support, and bye-bye. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AOS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1-1 on a spellcast.